Boxed boilers. Sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16 along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christys tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christys tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 3 p.m. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Miriam Cates. We're broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Now, the Met Police say there will be more dangerous officers like Wayne Couzens in the force after a bombshell High Court ruling means they can't sack staff through vetting.
Those we've removed vetting from had a pattern of behaviour that meant that if they applied to work in policing today, we would never let them in.
Conservative MPs seem to be at war over how best to tackle the threat of Reform UK, as Kemi Badenoch dismisses a pact as for the birds. But is it needed to save the UK? Well, Tory peer Lord Craig McKinley thinks so. We'll be speaking to him soon. And Labour's llama drama. New Health Minister Ashley Dalton, who previously called for an end to same-sex toilets, has also backed people identifying as llamas. Do you have sympathy for her, or should she unpack her bags? And what a load of rubbish. Bristol Council is under fire after considering plans to collect your bins only once a month in a bid to reduce costs and reverse a dip in recycling rates. Well, as always, we'd love to hear from you. Please do send your views and your comments to gbnews.com/yoursay. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB newsroom. Former Scottish footballer and Manchester United striker Denis Law is being laid to rest at Manchester Cathedral. Many former players and managers are in attendance, including former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson, alongside Paul Scholes, Peter Schmeichel, Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Brian Kidd. Members of the public are also paying their respects, and Old Trafford has projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law died last month at the age of 84. Elsewhere, Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January in 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London. In January 2023, she said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but she also added, "I feel the message was still relevant." Ms. Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believed it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." Elsewhere, the Metropolitan Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. The High Court has ruled the force's vetting procedures have been found to be unlawful. Sergeant Lino de Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley said the force will be seeking an appeal on the judgment.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
Elsewhere, MPs have scrutinised the assisted dying bill. At committee meetings this morning, it comes as it was revealed last night that assisted dying cases would no longer have to be signed off by the High Court under changes proposed by the bill's supporters. The proposed law currently says a High Court judge must check on each person and see if they're eligible and has not been coerced into making that decision to die. Kim Leadbeater, the Labour MP behind the terminally ill adults bill, is expected to bring forward amendments for a so-called Judge Plus system after hearing concerns during expert evidence sessions last month. The Law Society has issued a fresh warning today about an assisted dying law, saying it would require robust, accessible and independent safeguards. Labour officials were warned about offensive WhatsApp group messages before the comments were made public, it's been claimed today. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan's the second MP to be suspended by Labour. Greater Manchester Police said a non-crime hate incident had been recorded after the comments emerged, and former Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was also sacked. Gerald Cooney, the former Labour leader of Tameside Council, said he raised concerns about Andrew Gwynn's remarks several times in the past year. Labour sources said no formal complaint had been received about that WhatsApp group. Baroness Jackie Smith spoke to GB News.
We're not the nasty party. What we are is the decisive party. When the Prime Minister got the evidence of these messages, which I agree with you are completely unacceptable, what he did was to sack the Minister and to suspend from the Labour Party both of the MPs that were involved. Now, that stands in pretty stark contrast with previous Prime Ministers who faffed about the place and allowed senior ministers to stay in their roles when they had clearly breached the ministerial code. That's the difference that we're seeing.
And US President Donald Trump says the Israel-Hamas ceasefire should be cancelled if hostages held in Gaza are not returned on time. Terror group Hamas announced last night that they'll delay hostage releases planned for Saturday until further notice. President Trump said late last night that if all the hostages held in Gaza are not returned by Saturday at noon, he would propose cancelling the ceasefire and, quote, let all hell break loose. And those are the latest headlines for now. More news from me in half an hour.
Welcome back. Now, the Met Police say that there could be more officers like Wayne Couzens in the police force because of a legal ruling in the High Court today. Now, this means that hundreds of officers accused of sexual and domestic abuse could be reinstated. Joining me now in the studio is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, I think that Sir Mark Rowley has called this an absurd ruling and said that this means that hundreds of officers that potentially should have had their vetting removed will be allowed back into the force.
Well, what the Met Commissioner said is that absolutely, as far as he's concerned, none of these officers will get back into operational duty or duty of any kind. They will, if they're on special leave, as a number of them are, remain on that. It's absurd, he said, but it is the least worst option, because to let them back...
ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position.
The public, he says, is a risk he's not willing to take. But there's no doubt the Metropolitan Police are deeply frustrated here, because they got such a reputational kicking, understandably, after the murder of Sarah Everard at the hands of a serving Metropolitan Police officer, Wayne Couzens. And then the Casey review, Baroness Casey's review afterwards described the Metropolitan Police as not just institutionally racist, but also misogynistic and homophobic as well. So there's been a lot of soul-searching, big reviews and internal processes to look and re-vet officers to make sure that any that don't come up to the standards required of a serving police officer are removed from the force. And they've sacked just shy of 100 under what is called Operation Assure. Another 29 are currently suspended on sort of leave, if you like, while they await those decisions. But what the judgment today means is that they won't be able to, for the time being at least, sack those officers until there is a satisfactory outcome. And that outcome will probably mean the Home Office getting new legislation in place so that there is proper legislation in place to be able to ensure that what the police are doing here in sacking these officers is lawful, because effectively the judicial review today said that the police force was operating outside the law and not following due process.
Now, this case was the result of another officer who was one of the ones who'd had his vetting removed, but who challenged that in the court. But he said that the things that he was accused of, he was not guilty, and he's obviously been successful. And one of the comments that Sir Mark Rowley made was that in other jobs that are have far less security implications, the managers would absolutely be allowed to sack people with these kind of allegations against them.
Well, yes, and he may well have a point there. This officer is Sergeant Lino Di Maria, who faces a number of allegations were made against him, including allegations of sexual assault, rape. It's also alleged that he sent inappropriate messages to colleagues. So a number of allegations that the totality, obviously, the Metropolitan Police were looking at, and that would say to them that this is a person of bad character that should not be allowed in the force. But what we have to say is that, as I say, he denies all of the allegations against him. None of them have ever been put before a court and so proved in a court of law. And, of course, in this country, you are innocent until proved guilty. So the normal process, in absence of a court case, would be a gross misconduct allegation hearing. But, of course, that did take place and there was no case to answer against him. So the Metropolitan Police Federation backed this officer in that judicial review case because they're calling for clarity in the law. You know, if it's under legislation that the Metropolitan Police have this power to act if they get this bad character evidence and sack people, that's fine, it's in legislation. But it's not enshrined in law at the moment. So what they're doing is, technically, as the judge ruled, outside the law. This is, incidentally, what Sir Mark Rowley said outside of Scotland Yard a little earlier today.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
Mark Rowley there. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as he's concerned, he's obviously deeply frustrated because they have had such a battering in light of Sarah Everard and so many other issues over the years. They are trying to clean up house. But in doing that, this force and other forces have been saying to successive Home Secretaries, look, enshrine this in legislation, give us the powers so that we know that if an officer does fail vetting, we can then dismiss them. At the moment, they're just trying to rejuggle sort of internal sort of employment policies to be able to do that. But when you take it before a judge, they say, look, it doesn't stand up to any kind of scrutiny. This guy's whatever you might think, the suspicions you might have because of multiple allegations, but this guy has had his human rights infringed by not being able to properly defend himself with allegations that have never been proven.
Mark White, thank you very much. I think you'll be back with more on this later. Well, joining me now is former Met Senior Investigating Officer, Peter Kirkham. Peter, thank you for joining me. What does this ruling do for public confidence in the Met Police?
It depends how it's portrayed to the public, and I'm afraid the Commissioner has gone for the scaremongering approach rather than the true facts approach. Yes, it has left the police in a difficult position, and yes, things are not the best they can be at the moment, but what it doesn't mean at all is that officers who are a danger to the public cannot be sacked. Yes, they can. If misconduct is proved, they can be sacked for that. That wasn't the case here, as Marcus quite rightly said. Nothing was proved in misconduct hearings, and therefore you can't be sacked for misconduct if nothing's proved. The allegations are easy to make, and it's something that the police, we need to be particularly careful of in the police service, because otherwise you'll get criminals making allegations against police officers and getting them sacked for doing their job. And so it's a particularly difficult situation for police officers. Police officers are also in an unusual employment situation. They are not employees in law. They are office holders under the Crown. And yes, they have been brought into employee legislation around various aspects, including health and safety. Health and safety doesn't directly apply to them, except for legislation that says that it will be deemed to. Because of this office holder under a Crown situation, there are police regulations that set out the terms and conditions of employment, what a normal person in a normal job would find in their contract of employment. And those regulations are silent on the issue of dismissal because of vetting failure. Vetting is a fairly new issue as a headline. It's always been there, but it was never ever talked about, and it never seemed to become a public issue until the recent concerns about the standards of police officers over the last decade or so.
So, Peter,
has not
would you?
happened is the regulations have not kept up. They need to be updated, and they will.
So you would support then an updating of the regulations? Because I think the point that Mark Rowley was trying to make was that in other similar professions, in other professions that have far less implications for public security, allegations of those type, unproven, yes, but serious, would result in, for example, the employee not being allowed to return to the place of employment until the allegations were resolved. So would you support some sort of change of legislation that would give Sir Mark Rowley and the Met Police more power over people who've who've had allegations made against them?
I would certainly support a change to the regulations. It needs to be made clear what the implications of a withdrawal of vetting, bearing in mind that there was vetting passed to start with, and for a number of years. The officer involved in this case has been around for over 20 years. And so it's not that there's no vetting at all, but where a change in circumstances means that vetting is reconsidered and is withdrawn, then that needs to be made clear as a ground for dismissal in the regulations, and then that can happen quite legally. But as the judge has pointed out in the case that we're talking about here, the way that this has been done is effectively summary dismissal with no right to defend yourself and no right to challenge the accusations made, and that can't be right in any context. Police officers, just like anybody else, need to have the right to defend themselves, the opportunity to defend themselves, and understand what it is that's been alleged against them. And if they are found not guilty, they're found not to have done whatever's alleged against them, then they should be treated on that basis. And if the police wish to remove vetting as a result of some residual suspicions that they might have, then that needs to be subject to safeguards as well. Otherwise,
Peter,
we'll have
I'm
officers
afraid
being dismissed at the whim of the chief.
Peter Kirkham, I'm afraid we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for joining us. Former Met Senior Investigating Officer Peter Kirkham there. Now, moving on, hundreds of thousands of government contracts are being searched and exposed by an X account inspired by the work of Elon Musk's Doge department. Now, one post claims that £1.5 billion will be spent over 7 years on Greener Futures Partnership to decarbonise housing. So is this complete woke waste of money? Well, joining us now in the studio, we've got our reporter, Adam Cherry. Adam, I've been scrolling through this X account and there are some absolutely hilarious and scarcely believable uses of public money. We were just discussing, I think, £50,000 for looking at the health of Bangladeshi
I've got my
shrimps.
dossier. I've got my dossier here.
Give us the words.
So I just want to remind viewers that a lot of this stuff, in fact, almost all of this is in the public domain. So it's not as if it's hidden, but people are now, as a result of the focus in the US, back home, we're taking a look at some of our own spending from the government credit card and thinking, hang on a minute, taxes are at an all-time high, well, 70-year high. Public expenditure as a percentage of GDP is something like 45, 46%. And if you look at what it's being spent on, as you say, £50,000 to study shrimp health in Bangladesh, very useful, I'm sure. The procurement files of the account you just mentioned has found that £25 million will be spent to support green urban growth in Somalia, with an extension option for an additional £25 million if that doesn't quite go far enough. And I've had a look at myself. This is so easy to find. If you go on the NHS's website, bear in mind the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, said, I think last week, that he wants to roll back on these DEI jobs, which really, don't provide outcomes for patients, do they? Not quite getting on as he would hope, because we've got 52 grand a year for an equality, diversity and inclusion partner in Greater Manchester. What does that involve? Well, it does involve some travel to some external meetings, but the good news is it's a hybrid job, so at least you spend some time at home. That's not in isolation. It happens quite a lot. I've been covering this for quite some time. I remember doing one, I've got written here, the HMRC, the guys who are taking your cash to pay for some of this, they had a race delivery programme with almost 17 full-time staff, total budget of 1.5 million up to 2023, 3 million across, I think, 2 years. Admittedly, actually, that was under a Conservative government. So it's interesting to ask, how has this happened over the last few years? This has grown not just under Labour. Now people are starting to say, hang on a minute, why are we spending our money on this? Where's the value for
there's
the taxpayer?
a simple answer to that, and that is the Equality Act, which introduces public sector equality duty. That means that public bodies are no longer responsible just for making sure people aren't discriminated against, as a result of their race or their sexuality when applying for a job, let's say. But they're supposed to actively prevent discrimination. That means they create all these ridiculous jobs to actually look for problems and become activists. And absolutely, Conservative government should have stopped it. But unless you repeal the public sector equality duty, this is just going to go on.
And I remember when I covered this previously, we came across that answer. Is it not also, and you're supposed to be asking me these questions, but we're having a bit of discussion.
Having a bit of a
can't some of it be absorbed into existing HR jobs?
Absolutely.
It feels like there's a cottage industry here where a lot of people are making a lot of cash.
And the question I will ask you is, who makes the decisions to spend this money? It's not normally central government, is it? These are health boards.
Precisely. So let's take the NHS as an example, because that's where you see a lot of these at the moment, and it's where the government say they're cracking down. It's the argument is it's subcontracted to the health boards, to the individual hospitals. And so actually central government has less oversight unless, as you say, they take more drastic action. I think with these sorts of accounts holding government to account, that may happen over time. There's procurement files. We had Charlotte Gill on the programme earlier today. Guido Fawkes doing a similar thing, shining a spotlight on this stuff, and perhaps there'll be some change soon.
Hopefully it'll put people off advertising these kind of jobs. Adam Cherry, thank you so much. And do send in any examples that you've seen of appalling government waste. Well, still to come, I'll be joined by a Tory peer who disagrees with Kemi Badenoch that an election pact with reform is for the birds. I'm Miriam Cates on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Coldplay. It was
Steve Martin, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They did a gig.
Chris Martin. Chris Martin.
Have
they
apologised
for being British?
Yeah, they were
They did,
on
yes.
Patrick Christys' programme, I think, last night, weren't they?
Yeah, he was saying...
The clip was, they said they were playing in India somewhere, and they said, thank you very much for a wonderful reception. We almost didn't expect it, and they sort of apologised for being British.
Thanks for welcoming us despite being British.
Yeah, that's right. Mm.
No. I mean, that's a disgrace.
Yes, it is.
I mean, that's absolutely terrible. Why can't we be proud to be British?
It's becoming the norm to feel that you have to apologise all the time for being British, and I think that's wrong.
I think Bono did it about 20, 30 years ago when he was touring with U2, didn't he?
Well, stop it. Let's be proud.
He sang a song.
We've got a lot to be proud of in this country, and it's wrong to make it, and especially if it's... And it probably is filtering down to our children.
Yeah.
This feeling that you've got to apologise for being British, for heaven's sake.
Well, it's back to that old image, isn't it, of an England flag being viewed, someone flying an England flag, and you sort of tut and raise your eyebrows at it, which is just so wrong. You don't get that with any other flag, do you? That we're just meant to be embarrassed by it all.
Yeah, we've got to stop that. We really have.
Yeah, love being British. Want to be anything else? Thanks very much
No,
indeed.
I like being British.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Akua, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 24 minutes past 3. Now, it's for the birds. That's what Tory leader Kemi Badenoch had to say as she dismissed the idea of an election pact with Reform UK. Well, let's get the latest on this and all of our political news with GB News political editor Chris Hope, who joins me now. Chris, this is a growing source of disagreement, isn't it, amongst Conservative voices. Will there be a pact at the next election?
That is the only conversation that you have away from studios normally. This issue is, will the left, will the right come together? And if not now, if not pre-election, then post-election. If you look at the numbers here, the most recent poll we had from Find Out Now looked at around 23-24% share between the three we're going to call them main parties now, and Reform UK is one of those, despite their very tiny representation in the House of Commons, with just 5 MPs. They're forecast to gain maybe 200 more at the election based on current polling, and that gives Nigel Farage the whip hand in creating a coalition with the Tories to run the country after 2029. That's why everyone's talking about it, because Kemi Badenoch, the new leader of the Tory party, hasn't really cut through. She passed 100 days yesterday, but she doesn't really move the dial. She says she's developing policies for the long term. She's listening and talking in principles, not policies, to get agreement. But while there's a vacuum, in storms Farage to take all this support. I think and right now we need to be asking Farage more questions. You know, who is your Chancellor?
Yeah.
Who is your Home Secretary? Is it Lee Anderson? You know, is it Rupert Lowe? You've got 5 people, James McMurdoch. You know, there's 5 individuals of MPs. Where is your opposition team? How could you run the country tomorrow? The answer is they couldn't.
No.
They haven't got any people there.
And they're going to have to not only rapidly select candidates, but choose some of those candidates to be their spokespeople on these issues.
It is very possible we will have an election where we won't know who the new Home Secretary is. We won't know who the Welfare Secretary is. They'll come from nowhere in private life. They're still an MP, then a cabinet on day 2. It could be dramatic if this happens.
Now, I can completely understand why both Conservative voters and Reform voters don't want a pact. You know, there'll be lots of... Because that would mean, let's say, Reform pick 100 seats where the Conservatives don't stand, Conservatives pick 100 seats where Reform don't stand. But if you're a Reform voter with no Reform candidate, that's going to make you quite angry, and ditto with Conservatives. So isn't the best option to wait a couple of years until people are so fed up with Labour that they would hold their nose and vote for a different party?
Normally, you do put a candidate up, but you soft pedal it, so you don't fight very hard. And there's been suggestions other parties have done that in some seats, and that might happen. I think no question Reform UK will want to stand in 650 seats. That's a kind of pride issue.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued about the dynamics here. The denial from the Mail Sunday reporting about the talks between Robert Jenrick, and then he's obviously not leader, and him and Reform UK. The denial was put out there by the party, not by Farage himself. I wonder whether there's any differentiation between what some of the party want and what he wants.
Well, let's bring in Tory peer Lord Craig McKinley, who was an MP in the last Parliament. Craig, thank you so much for joining me. Now, you disagree with Kemi Badenoch, don't you, that a pact is neither necessary nor desirable?
I think you're looking for conflict, and I have no conflict with what Kemi's view is of this. What I'm looking at is a reality check as we approach the next general election as to what might be. My main concern is to stop an ongoing hard-left socialist Labour government. Now, I think Chris Hope there has given you quite a reality check of, what is the reality of reform? It is in terms of representation in the Commons, it's pretty small. And quite rightly, I don't know I don't know what their policies are. We know what they're against, and that we're against, similarly, in my own mind, similar things. I'm against the levels of immigration. I'm against the level of wasteful spend. I'm against the woke agenda. So we know what they're against, but I don't know any more than you do what they're actually for. But there are some change dynamics going on in British politics. Gone are the days where you knocked on a door, as I've been doing for 30 years, and somebody would answer and say, I'm Labour, always been Labour, family's been Labour, I'm always going to vote Labour. Those days have gone. People are far more fluid in what they're likely to vote, and we have to accept that there are a number of Labour voters now being attracted to reform. That's always been there, but I think we have to be realistic and say most new Reform voters are ex-Conservatives, by and large. Now, how mad will we all be by facilitating an ongoing hard-left socialist government at the next election? Because, as ever, the right, who agree on most things, strangely, are fighting each other more vigorously than we're both fighting the true opposition and the real people we should be fighting against, and that is the Labour government. We started to think a bit about that on July the 5th and thought, oh my God, what on earth happened here? Reform got 4.5 million votes, Conservatives got 9 million. People like yourself lost their seat because of Reform's intervention, and we all thought, oh dear, that was rather silly, wasn't it? But that silliness has now turned to absolute horror, because we've now had 6 months of a Labour government. We're seeing what they're capable of. The net zero agenda gone completely mad, taking away people's winter fuel allowance, a budget that has virtually destroyed the economy. They've created Britain into a basket case in far fewer days than I ever thought they ever could, but they've done it. So we now know what they're capable of, and we've got to make sure it doesn't happen for any longer than we need it to.
Craig, I've still got Chris Hope with me in the studio, who I think has got a question for you.
Hi, Craig. Great to see you. Just got two quick questions, very quick questions. Are talks ongoing now about bringing together Reform UK and the Tories? Yes or no? Simple question. And the second one is, you know Nigel Farage, you campaigned and beat him in 2015. I think you had a form of professional relationship with him in the last century. You helped advise on when you knew him quite privately. Does he want to be Prime Minister? Two simple questions, Craig.
Well, discussions, I don't know. So I can't give you yes or no. I don't know. I think the answer is no, from what I know. The Farage thing, I mean, the trouble is it went wrong in 2019. He did give a very, very broad and expansive undertaking and took his troops away from incumbent Conservative-held seats. That was a very generous offer. And from what I understand, there wasn't really due thanks given. So on the back of that, Nigel, unfortunately, now hates the Conservative Party rather more than he seems to hate the Labour Party. That, I think, is dangerous to the country because his own enmity that he's created with the Conservatives, for whatever reason he holds, I don't think is going to be for the service of the country. I'm sure he'd like to be Prime Minister, but you would think, looking at the way various Prime Ministers have been treated by their own parties in Parliament, it's not always a job that everybody really should want. To be honest with you, it's a job I never wanted in the whole of my life. Thank you very much.
Craig, that is a shame, because I do think you'd actually be an excellent Prime Minister. And, you know, you could be the first from the House of Lords for a long time.
Well, yeah, I just don't do woke, and I'm not sure you'd be a right fit in my party, Miriam. You know, you're all a bit on that side of things.
Craig, thank you so much for joining us, Craig McKinley there. Well, there's still lots more to come between now and 4 o'clock, including Bristol Council is under fire for considering plans to collect bins only once a month. But first, here we've got your latest news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories, we start with some breaking news this hour that 2 bodies found in a river in Aberdeen have been identified as those of sisters Eliza and Henrietta Hutsey, who went missing in January. That coming from Police Scotland this hour. These sisters, both aged 32, were last seen on CCTV footage on Market Street at Victoria Bridge over the River Dee in Aberdeen on the 7th of January. Police also say there do not appear to be any suspicious circumstances. More on this breaking story as we get it. Elsewhere, former Scottish footballer and Manchester United striker Denis Law is being laid to rest at Manchester Cathedral. Many former players and managers have been in attendance, including former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson. Also alongside Paul Scholes, Peter Schmeichel, Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Brian Kidd. Members of the public have also been paying their respects, and Old Trafford also projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law died last month at the age of 84. Elsewhere, Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London in January 2023. She said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, "I feel the message was still relevant." Ms. Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believed it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." And the Metropolitan Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance, the High Court has ruled today. The force's vetting procedures have been found to be unlawful. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. And those are the latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Tatiana Sanchez. More news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing, but where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These are most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. It could take a little while to clear. A cloudier story further east, and there could be some rain around as well. Similar for much of Northern Ireland and down across the eastern side of England, pretty cloudy, some drizzly outbreaks of rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet pushing its way through, but a brighter start perhaps for some parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, but here again we could have some fog or freezing fog patches to watch out for. As we go through the day tomorrow, most places staying grey and cloudy, still a few outbreaks of light rain towards the east, only one or two making their way further west. Western parts again, the best chance of seeing some brightness, perhaps a little bit more of that than today. Temperatures may be up a degree or so, but still feeling pretty chilly. Unsurprising, it is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In South Yorkshire and Sheffield Parkway, the A61, that's still shut both ways for a police investigation, closed between the Park Square roundabout and Derek Dooley Way. In Warwickshire, the M42 northbound is partly blocked after a collision. It's between junction 7 at Coes Hill and junction 8 for the M6 turn-off. In Essex at West Horndon, the Southend Arterial Road, the A127, that's partly blocked coastbound after a collision just before the Halfway House roundabout. And in Hertfordshire, delays on the clockwise M25, that's queuing in the roadworks between junction 22 at St Albans and 23 for the A1M at South Mimms.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's nearly 20 to 4 and I'm Miriam Kate and you're watching GB News. Now, the people of Bristol are concerned about the City Council changing their bin collection service. New changes will see a reduction of black bin collections from bi-weekly to just once a month. Apparently, this plan will reduce carbon emissions and save £2.3 million. But are the people of Bristol happy about this new service? Well, joining us from Bristol is GB News West Midlands reporter Jack Carson. Jack, thanks for joining me. Once every 4 weeks, this doesn't sound sufficient for an ordinary household's needs.
Well, that's exactly the kind of feedback that we've been getting from people all across. We've been to the north part of Bristol, northwest. We've now in Clifton. We've been at city centre as well. We've been all around this city today, finding out what people think, and all of them really sharing quite a few key concerns consistently across the day as we've spoken to them. One being, the idea of reducing services. That this is a consultation, so the council are in consultation with the public. They're asking people for their feedback. Some of the options on that consultation are to keep it at the 2 weeks for collection for the black bins, 3 weeks or 4 weeks. The council's saying that 3 weeks would save them just over £1 million, 4 weeks could save them £2.3 million. They say that's because costs in terms of dealing with any residual non-recyclable waste are going up, and so they're having to try and balance the books in that sense. But the key concerns that people are telling us really are things like possible increases in vermin in the area, increases in fly tipping as well, and just general hygiene and smell. And there's particular issues that maybe now in winter when it's cold, it might not be as noticeable, but particularly in the winter when there's hot weather, what impact is that going to have in the area? We've been speaking to people, as I was saying, across the city, residents and businesses. Maria Reeves owns Petal Florists in the north-west part of the city. Here's what she told us a little earlier on.
Yes, I have heard about it, and I've got a lot of customers quite concerned about this. It's just too long, really. At the end of the day, you know, especially when we come into the summer, the amount of rubbish that's going to accumulate, and it's the pest side of things, really, like with rats and maggots and that sort of thing. Back in the 1970s, there was a strike, which obviously went on for quite a long time, and people were dying from diseases with all these, you know, pests, etc., that were accumulating because of rubbish accumulating in the streets.
Well, that's what Maria Reeves saying there in that florist. There is that real worry around fly tipping. I mean, we literally saw some fly tipping under a sign that said no fly tipping. So that is a problem in this city, as it is across many parts of this city as well. Just let me bring you what the councils say. So the council's deputy leader, who's the Green Party councillor Heather Mack, has said this is in order to try and reduce the cost and the impact that it's having on the environment. They've talked about ideas if it was to go to a longer bin collection rate to be able to offer larger bins for larger households, extra collection for people with sanitary products or nappies. That was one of the main things that a lot of people have been telling us they're concerned about today. But the council say their aim is to try and increase the amount that their city recycles to meet national targets, and they say deliver benefits for the city. But also the Green Party saying that no decision has yet currently been made. This is all about evaluating rubbish and recycling collections. But we've spoken to both the leader of Bristol Labour earlier, Tom Renard, and also the leader of the Bristol Conservatives, Mark Weston, both of them sharing those concerns, particularly around fly tipping and the impact that a 4-week black bin collection might well have on their residents.
Jack, thank you so much for that report. Jack Carson in Bristol there. Well, joining me now is GB News Science and Health Editor, Lucy Johnston. Lucy, thank you for joining me. Obviously, the council has some budgetary concerns here, but this will be not only hugely inconvenient for residents, but also a health and safety issue.
Well, there are huge concerns, and I've spoken to a few experts there. So vermin, there's a potential increase in vermin, rats, mice, seagulls, foxes who eat rats, which eat rats. The odours from the bins are offensive as well. So it's about quality of life too. And I think what some of the residents are angry about is they seem to be paying a lot more money. The council taxes have gone up, I think, for 5 years running in Bristol to the maximum amount that they're allowed to, 4.99%, I think, but they're not getting as much for their money. So they're actually having museums potentially mothballed. That's been one proposal. Libraries closed, social care's on its knees. So this is what they're angry about. But of course, the council believes and says, and I've spoken to them today as well, that they believe that this will reduce the amount of black bin waste there is. So whether that does happen, obviously 4 weeks is a long time for any waste to be lying around. Cockroaches, insects. And of course, there's not just the health risks from the rotting food and other products, but there's also methane and other air pollution that comes from rotting waste. So that is also something that ought to be considered. I had spoken to a few experts on recycling today as well. And much as, we read it sometimes, but, the recycling that goes in our recycling bins that we think Faith 3 goes away and makes new things, a lot of that doesn't happen. Plastics are really difficult to recycle. I spoke to the council today about that. They were unaware of it, it seemed, but there are some estimates that put the amount of plastic recycled as low as 20%, and a lot of it has to actually be shipped away across abroad to Turkey, Bulgaria, other countries where we believe that much of it gets incinerated anyway. So it's a very mixed picture. It's complicated. The council does say that in other parts of the country where bin collections, black bin collections have been reduced. There's been a dramatic increase in recycling and a reduction in black bin waste. But, we need to see that. And already at the moment, Bristol, there are narrow streets. People don't have big front gardens. The place is already missing bin collections. There's already problems. So to add more issues seems, it's precarious already. People are already fraught and anxious there.
Yes, because of course, if you miss your bin collection and it's weekly, you might be able to just hang on for that second week. But if you missed a monthly bin collection, if you're away or something, I mean, the consequences are quite horrendous. Well, if you are affected by that, please do write into GB News. Lucy Johnston, our health editor, thank you so much for joining us. Now, if you're fed up of dirty bins and are in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of our top European holiday destinations.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Plenty of cloud elsewhere across Europe, could also turn showery at times. These showers turning increasingly thundery as we head into Thursday for some. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, though it could be breezy at times across the Canary Islands. But as we move our way further east, much more cloud, also some showers at times. These could start to turn thundery across parts of Croatia, Albania and also parts of Greece as we head into Thursday. So those showers continuing for some, drier elsewhere with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
TikTok chefs, Instagram chefs, that they put children off or young people off of cooking because it's so expertly done they can't do it. No, my young lad, he's 17, he is amazing in the kitchen. Oh, he is. He's amazing in the kitchen. And he gets it all off TikTok. He comes down, he can put burgers, wraps, stews, curries, sauces, and the smells in the kitchen. I said, where'd you get these? Oh, just TikTok, I'm trying it out. And it's just amazing the things that he can conjure up. So for some people, it might be... it's an inspiration for him. So they're saying that it's intimidation. For my boy, it's an inspiration. They say it's entertainment. For my boy, it's an infomercial. I watch him doing his stuff. At that stage, I could do baked beans on toast and knock up a salad. That was it. But my boy can do all sorts of stuff.
It makes it accessible as well, doesn't it? Because lots of people say, like, you need an education to be in the kitchen, or you need to go find yourself loads of cookbooks. But you don't.
No.
You go on your phone now.
Well, I mean, like, all the spices, sesame oil. I mean, I'm amazed at the stuff that he does. So it's encouraging. All you just need is a kitchen well-stocked and have a go. And understand that failure is actually the route to learning. I mean, he's made mistakes, he's stuck stuff in the bin, but that young man, I am amazed at some of the stuff he does.
I don't mind cooking at all. It's cleaning up that I have the problem with. Dawn, let's talk about sex.
Can I just say there are things called restaurants, by the way? Just put that one. My hell, I don't even know where the kitchen is.
OK.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Welcome back. It's 10 to 4. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Now, the latest announcement in Donald Trump's trade war is said to threaten a devastating blow to the UK steel industry. The US president has announced that he will impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminium imports. Well, let's speak now with Director General of UK Steel, Gareth Stace. Gareth, thank you for joining me. The UK steel industry is not exactly in a healthy place. What could the impact of these tariffs be from the US?
Well, Miriam, you're absolutely right. The steel sector in the UK is not in a good place at the moment. But why? There are some global issues, massive global overcapacity of steel, softening demand globally, prices depressed. But in the UK, as you know very well, our costs are much more than our competitors in Europe and globally. We pay much more for, say, electricity than our competitors. So anything that hits the global steel sector hits us in the UK much, much worse. And so, what's the impact? Well, we supply £400 million worth of steel to the US each year. It's a very high value export market for us, our second biggest export market. And so if we do get 25% tariffs on that, it's £100 million tax tariff that our customers will pay. And will they continue to buy the steel from us when it costs 25% more? Imagine if they could go elsewhere, they might do. And that will really hit us hard, given the precarious state of the steel sector at the moment.
Yes, indeed. Now, is there anything that the UK government could do? Obviously, there have been concerns in the past that the UK itself has already been subject to steel dumping from other countries. Is there anything that the UK government can do to protect the steel industry, aside from, of course, acting on energy prices, which I know you believe is long overdue? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yes, the government can, and I'm hoping that they are already, as we speak, having negotiations with the UK government. And why? Because what is President Trump suggesting here? There have been tariffs on steel since 2018, 25% tariffs since 2018. They have not stopped. What has changed is since that time, we in the UK have managed to get from the UK government and from our customers exemptions from those tariffs. We don't pay them. But the countries that President Trump is trying to target here with his new tariffs are the countries that have been paying the 25% tariffs all along, if you see what I mean. So who is he hurting? He's hurting his friends and allies, the UK, by slapping a 25% tariff on our steel. But the countries that he's trying to target, nothing changes. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. We're going to have to leave it there. Gareth Stace there from UK Steel. We've got to move on now. Fancy your chance to be one of 2 lucky winners in the current Great British Giveaway? Well, here are all the details you'll need.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16 along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, there's plenty more to come on today's show, and we'll be continuing our coverage of that breaking news that the Met Police will be more likely to have dangerous officers after a bombshell High Court ruling today. I'm Miriam Cates, you're watching GB News.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed Heat Pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing, but where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These are most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning, and could take a little while to clear. A cloudier story further east, and there could be some rain around as well. Similar for much of Northern Ireland and down across the eastern side of England, pretty cloudy, some drizzly outbreaks of rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet pushing its way through, but a brighter start perhaps for some parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, but here again we could have some fog or freezing fog patches to watch out for. As we go through the day tomorrow, most places staying grey and cloudy, still a few outbreaks of light rain towards the east, only one or two making their way further west. Western parts again, the best chance of seeing some brightness, perhaps a little bit more of that than today. Temperatures may be up a degree or so, but still feeling pretty chilly. Unsurprising, it is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In West Yorkshire, the M62 is partly blocked westbound after a collision between junction 23 at Huddersfield and 22 for Rishworth Moor. In South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, the Sheffield Parkway, the A61, that's still closed in both directions. That's for an ongoing police investigation, and it's shut between Park Square roundabout and Derrick Dooley Way. In Warwickshire, the M42 northbound is partly blocked after a collision between Coes Hill at junction 7 and junction 8 for the M6 turn-off. And in Surrey, the M25 is queuing anti-clockwise in the roadworks, and they're between junction 11 for Chertsey in the A317 and junction 10 for the A3.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Don't miss your chance to be one of two big winners in our latest Great British giveaway, as we have two prize bundles that have to be won. First, you'll win a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash to spend however you like. You'll also receive the very latest iPhone 16, and we'll send you on a shopping spree with £500 to spend in your favourite store. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, it's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Miriam Kate, and we are broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and all across the UK. Well, the Met Police say there will be more dangerous officers like Wayne Couzens in the force after a bombshell High Court ruling means they can't sack staff who have failed vetting procedures.
Those we've removed vetting from had a pattern of behaviour that meant that if they applied to work in policing today, we would never let them in.
And Conservative MPs seem to be at war over how best to tackle the threat of Reform UK, as Kemi Badenoch dismisses a pact as for the birds. Labour's llama drama. New Health Minister Ashley Dalton, who previously called for an end to single-sex toilets, has also backed people identifying as llamas. Do you have sympathy for her, or should she alpaca bags? Well, as always, we want to hear from you, so please do send your views and comments to gbnews.com/yoursay. First of all, it's time for your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories from the GB newsroom. The High Court has ruled that the Metropolitan Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. The force's vetting procedures have been found to be unlawful. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the force will be seeking an appeal on the judgment.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
Two bodies found in a river in Aberdeen have been identified as those of sisters Henrietta and Eliza Husty, who went missing in January, Police Scotland have said. The sisters, both aged 32, were last seen on CCTV on Market Street at Victoria Bridge over the River Dee in Aberdeen on the 7th of January. Police also say there do not appear to be any suspicious circumstances. MPs have scrutinised the assisted dying bill after it was revealed last night that cases would no longer have to be signed off by the High Court under changes proposed by the bill's supporters. The proposed law currently says a High Court judge must check each person is eligible and has not been coerced into making the decision to die. Kim Leadbeater, the Labour MP behind the Terminally Ill Adults Bill, is expected to bring forward amendments for a so-called Judge Plus system after hearing concerns during expert evidence sessions last month. The Law Society has issued a fresh warning today about an assisted dying law, saying it would require robust, accessible and independent safeguards. Elsewhere, Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London. She said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, "I feel the message was still relevant." Ms Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believed it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." Elsewhere, Labour officials were warned about offensive WhatsApp group messages before the comments were made public, it's been claimed today. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan is the second MP to be suspended by Labour. Greater Manchester Police said a non-crime hate incident had been recorded after the comments emerged, and former Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was sacked. Gerald Cooney, the former Labour leader of Tameside Council, said he raised concerns about Andrew Gwynn's remarks several times in the past year. Labour sources said no formal complaint had been received about the WhatsApp group. Baroness Jackie Smith spoke to GB News.
We're not the nasty party. What we are is the decisive party. When the Prime Minister got the evidence of these messages, which I agree with you are completely unacceptable, what he did was to sack the Minister and to suspend from the Labour Party both of the MPs that were involved. Now, that stands in pretty stark contrast with previous Prime Ministers who faffed about the place and allowed senior ministers to stay in their roles when they had clearly breached the ministerial code. That's the difference that we're seeing.
US President Donald Trump says the Israel-Hamas ceasefire should be cancelled if hostages held in Gaza are not returned on time. Terror group Hamas announced last night that they'll delay hostage releases planned for Saturday until further notice. President Trump said late last night that if all the hostages held in Gaza are not returned by Saturday at noon, he would propose cancelling the ceasefire and, quote, let all hell break loose. And former Scottish footballer and Manchester United striker Denis Law has been laid to rest today. Many former players and managers were in attendance, including former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson, Paul Scholes, Peter Schmeichel, Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville, Ruud van Nistelrooy and Brian Kidd were also there to pay their respects. Members of the public have been paying their respects as well, and Old Trafford projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law died last month at the age of 84. And those are the latest headlines. For now, it's back to Miriam.
Welcome back. And the Met Police say that there will be more officers like Wayne Couzens in the police force because of a legal ruling in the High Court. This means that hundreds of officers accused of sexual and domestic abuse could be reinstated. Well, joining me now is our Home and Security Editor, Mark White. Now, Mark, Sir Mark Rowley, the head of the Metropolitan Police, is very, very angry about this decision. He's not going to bring these suspended police officers back into frontline duties, but instead they're going to still be paid, but not able to work.
Yes, he's described that as the least worst option, but none of it is satisfactory as far as the police service is concerned. It's not just the Metropolitan Police. Police forces right across the country could fall foul of this legislation or lack of it, which basically means that police don't really have the power to get rid of officers who fail vetting tests. If you are applying to join the police, they check your criminal record, they check your financial records, they also look into your sort of associates and family history. And if you're deemed to be of bad character, then you won't get accepted into the service. But these vetting checks also continue at a regular interval throughout someone's career. And if someone then falls foul of the vetting checks, normally what would happen is under sort of internal employment rules, they would be dismissed from the force. But that's now been challenged in the High Court. A judicial review handed down today in the case of a police officer, Sergeant Lino Di Maria, who is accused of multiple allegations of sexual assault, of rape, of sending inappropriate messages to other colleagues. But none of these allegations were ever tested in a court of law. He was never charged, prosecuted. So he is, of course, in the eyes of the law, innocent, but he's still been effectively, he's in the process of being dismissed by the Metropolitan Police. He's challenged that, and the judicial review handed down today has ruled in his favour. This is what the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said on the steps of Scotland Yard a little earlier today.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
Mark, this is a very difficult situation, isn't it? Because, of course, nobody should be convicted of a crime without a fair trial and the allegations should be proven. But on the other hand, being a police officer is a very sensitive job, and should the police not be able to sack someone from if there are allegations, even if they're not proven? I mean, an equivalent would be a teacher in a classroom. If there was a suspicion that they had abused a child, they would be suspended. They would not be allowed back onto the premises.
Yes, indeed. And the police, obviously, they have to be seen as whiter than white, especially given what we've seen in recent years with the slew of different allegations against officers, the most notable, of course, being the murder of Sarah Everard in 2021 by PC Wayne Couzens, who abducted, raped and then murdered this young woman. In the following that particular horrific crime, there was this review by Baroness Casey that accused the Met of not only being institutionally racist but also misogynistic and homophobic. And so there's been a lot of soul searching within the Met in particular, but the police service as a whole. They've been conducting internal reviews, looking at those individuals who they might have had concerns about having bad character, and they're in the process of getting rid of them. They got rid of already just shy of 100. Another 29 are in the process of being sacked, including Sergeant Di Maria. So that is now on hold until the law gets changed. The Home Office has said that it is now urgently looking to bring in new legislation and to change the law itself. But it's clearly very frustrating for Mark Rowley and others within the police service, because they want to get rid of those that they feel are not suitable to be police officers, but they're being hamstrung really by the lack of any real power to do that.
Mark White, thank you very much. Well, to unpack this further, we've now got former senior investigating officer in the Metropolitan Police, Colin Sutton. Colin, thank you for joining me. Do you share Sir Mark Rowley's concerns about this ruling?
To a degree, but it's not as simple as it sounds, and it's not as simple as the banner headlines and how it's being reported. First of all, vetting, like DBS checks, is a grade. It's meant to inform a decision, and that decision that it informs is to appoint or not appoint, and nobody will be appointed to the police who don't meet the standard in that vetting procedure. The difficulty comes when you're reapplying that vetting throughout officers' careers, and they have done something which falls short of misconduct and can't be proved as misconduct. That's what all this ruling says. Now, the issue is, if somebody's not fit to be a police officer, then they should have done something wrong that justifies that decision. And if the misconduct processes and if the timescales for dealing with misconduct were better, then it would be a simpler process to rid the force of these people when they committed these misconducts. But the problem is, we've actually got a system which is very, very slow, very painful, and very clunky, and it takes months and months and months, if not years, to go through that process. That's, I think, where the change needs to be, because nobody wants police officers working in their homes if they're not fit to do that. The Commissioner's absolutely right when he says that. But it's not right either to pull the rug from under somebody's feet in their job because there is an allegation made against them, which could be, police officers upset people sometimes. It's part of the territory. And the danger of malicious complaints and malicious allegations then having a seismic effect on that officer's career needs to be coped with and dealt with. So, I kind of understand that that's where this judgment is coming from. I understand the Commissioner's reluctance to go along with it, and his horror, really, because, in the wake of Wayne Couzens, there was a real need to make sure that can't be repeated and show that the Met were doing something. And he's been trying to do that. And now he's found that the tool he's using can't be used anymore.
And of course, as you've referred to, Smart Rallies try very hard to instil public confidence back into the police by going down this process. And now it seems that he's got another job to do in raising confidence again. Would you support then a change in the law or the regulations that would allow either temporary or permanent suspension of officers who had failed repeated vetting procedures?
It perhaps needs to be a little more subtle than that. Perhaps what actually it needs is a regulation that says it is misconduct by a police officer to fail vetting. But then you come back to the problem that if they're just simple, malicious and foundless allegations, you can't allow that to happen, because otherwise we'll end up with no police officers, because all the opposition will start saying, well, all we need to do is to allege that he did this or she did that. We can get rid of them. And we need to guard against that. So it isn't as easy as it looks. And it's certainly, there's a lot behind the banner headlines and the things that are being said.
Indeed, no easy answers. Colin Sutton, thank you so much for joining us, former Senior Investigating Officer in the Metropolitan Police. Well, do you fancy your chance to be one of 2 lucky winners in the current Great British Giveaway? Here are all the details that you need.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, still to come on the show, a shock new poll has Reform UK surging to its highest figure so far. I'm Miriam Cates on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As we kick off 2025, many of us might be thinking about a bit of a wardrobe refresh, especially if you're over 50 and you feel like the high street doesn't quite cater to you.
Indeed. That's where our next guest, Mel Tillett, comes in. She's in the studio with us now.
Mel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That you are this accidental influencer. I love that you said that's the first time.
Yeah, it is. That's the first time I've heard it.
You can have that for free on
thank
TV.
you so much. It's quite true.
Tell us about your following. Obviously, an influencer that many people might typically think of would be someone in their teens, someone in their 20s, someone who's particularly social media savvy, using TikTok. Talk to us about your brand of influencer.
Well, our influencer, my kind of influence is over the older age group, the over 50s. For my business, I do a lot of live videos. I'll do them early in the morning at 7:30, which sounds ridiculous, but I know my ladies are up and about at that time having a cup of coffee or whatever that might be. And just being honest about day-to-day life. So my dogs are running about, my grandchildren are even sometimes in them, one thing and another. So it's just been purely by accident that I've got this really nice, loyal following, and I get lovely messages off ladies. I'll do things like, I'll tell them when I'm going for a mammogram, and I'll say, come on, everybody go for your mammogram.
That's brilliant.
All sort of health-conscious things. I've been a lot heavier than I am now, and I've slimmed down and lost some weight. I've been talking about that journey as well. And then ladies will ask me questions on the videos, and we chat about all sorts of different things. And now I'm getting messages every day, and people are loving the clothing ranges that we do. And it's just, I started off as a business, that's purely what I did, but it's turned out into this other, I get recognised places I go now, which is really weird.
It must be a huge benefit to your business as well.
We employ around about 50 people.
Wow.
And I'm quite open to my audience and saying, you know, while ever you keep buying off us, while ever you're loving our products and our clothing, you're keeping 50 people in jobs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Welcome back. It's 4:20. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Well, a shock new poll has Reform UK surging to its highest figure so far. The party has topped a YouGov poll with 26% of the vote, pushing the Labour Party down into second place and moving 5 points clear of the Conservatives. Well, I've got in the studio with me here now former MP Michael Fabricant, former colleague of mine, to discuss this. I mean, this is very good news for Reform, isn't it, this poll?
Of course it is, but I'll say what everybody says, which is it's only one poll. They always say that.
Well, all the recent polls have
yes,
got
this
Reform
month it's been bad news for the Conservative Party, that's for sure. And, of course, in a way, it's bad news for the right, I would argue, because it actually splits the vote by having 2 right-wing, if you can call the Conservative Party right-wing, maybe that's the problem. 2 right-wing parties, whereas Labour are alone on the left, apart from when you had the Gaza Party, as it were, you know, a few months ago.
Yes, and of course that doesn't affect every constituency, whereas we are seeing a Reform vote share rise in every constituency. Of course, what people are now thinking is what happens at the next election. A lot of people are fed up with the Labour government, particularly people on the right who would call themselves Conservatives. But if it goes on as it is, with Reform on 26, Conservative on 23, let's say, at the next election, Labour could still come through the middle.
Yeah, and that's really what happened this time, because it wasn't in 2024 people voting actively for the Labour Party. It was just simply to vote against the Conservatives. But in many areas, including yours, I suspect, and mine, Reform took enough votes away from the Conservatives. And so I lost by a few hundred, you know, but that's democracy. But the interesting thing is, what do we do now? Now, I was involved in a WhatsApp discussion. Some people like to say spat. I wouldn't call it a spat at all. But anyway, a discussion on WhatsApp and saying we can't ignore Reform. That's the Conservatives, can't ignore Reform. And it's silly to bury your head in the sand. But to make any prediction about what happens in 4 years' time, I think is naive. Anything could happen. The Reform Party could implode, though I suspect that unlike previous incarnations when it was UKIP, when they imploded, I think they can now sense power and there'll be more self-discipline. So we have to decide, what do we do about it? Do we take action now? And I think that would be far too early. And indeed, both Nigel Farage and Kemi Badenoch have said, you know, we're not going to consider any coalition. But let's be honest, just between the two of us, you know, in 2009, if you'd said to the Conservatives, would you go into coalition with the Lib Dems? Both the Lib Dems and the Conservatives would have screamed, that's complete madness, it'll never happen. But of course it did happen, the famous Cameron-Nick Clegg coalition, if you can call it that.
But that was a post-election pact. And of course, nobody could have predicted it. Nobody perhaps would have admitted to it in advance. But the difference this time is, in order to get to the position where the Conservative Party and the Reform Party between them could form a government, there's going to have to be some sort of pre-election pact to stop this splitting of the vote. And the only mechanism I can see for that is for, let's say, Reform to choose 150 constituencies that they want to fight unopposed by the Conservatives, and the Conservatives to choose 150 constituencies that they want to fight unopposed by Reform. And that, of course, it couldn't happen now, but even if that does happen in 2 years' time, that'd be unbelievably contentious, wouldn't it?
It might be contentious, but a lot of people would say that's a business-like approach. And, you know, you've had enough experience of the House of Commons, and I have too, to know that the House of Commons and politics sadly is rarely businesslike. So whether they come to that sort of agreement, I don't know. But if the right want to take, I hate saying the right, because it all sounds like when you talk about the far right, and this isn't far right, neither Reform nor the Conservatives.
It's where the centre was 20 years ago, Michael.
Yeah. But if you want the right in and Labour out, I think, if both parties are going strongish, one stronger than the other, who knows what it'll be in 2 or 3 years' time, there's got to be some pact or another.
Well, we're now joined in the studio by Christopher Hope, our political correspondent. Chris, what's your take on these latest discussions about a pact?
I think it's all everyone talks about away from the studio. It's great that at GBNews we're trying to get out there into the open with a grandee like Michael Fabricant. I think it's certainly the question everyone's talking about is how will these two come together? Because your party and Farage's one agree on so many issues, don't they? I think what's happening here, though, is it's governing is hard. We're 8 months after your party lost 14 years in power. And the ideas we offered up, I think, by Reform are just easy ones, net zero on migration. Well, how can you make that work if you've got a shortage in some parts of the economy and other parts? I think what the policy last week on delaying giving citizenship to those who came over in what's now been called the Boris wave under the Tory government is quite sensible. It shows the party is clearing up a mistake they made. It's a mistake being made clear by Kemi Badenoch. Delay giving those who arrived here until they're earning their way in this country. That makes sense. So there's a degree of logic to the Tory response so far. I think that, I'm just talking to a very senior shadow cabinet minister, the party has got a lot more active. Kemi Badenoch is doing a lot more things, probably around the 100 days past yesterday, but also aware that this polling here, looking at the Reform on 26 points, Labour 25, Tories becalmed on 21, at some point, will your colleagues start going, look, we agree with so many things, let's put ego to one side. The most important thing is getting Labour out of office.
Yeah. And isn't it also the case, though, that on the one hand, Kemi Badenoch, understandably, doesn't want to commit herself too early on in the electoral cycle. But on the other hand, if you create a vacuum where there's no policy, vacuums always get filled. And at the moment, it's being filled by Reform.
And that policy on citizenship from Kemi Badenoch was the first unprompted policy. Until then, it's been in response to the Labour government. Finally, we have an idea of what she's doing. And it makes a degree of sense, I think. It's sorting out the problem that the Tory government...
Yeah, and that policy had been called for by a number of the Conservative-leaning think tanks for a number of weeks. It's interesting that was
picked up on. Miriam.
Indeed, yes, indeed. But I still think that there is of course, there are personality barriers to any kind of pact. Farage has probably had enough of doing a deal with the Conservatives after what happened in 2019. For obvious reasons, Kemi Badenoch does not want to commit to a party that wants to destroy hers. That's their stated aim. But actually, isn't the biggest barrier the voters? Because the politicians can sit there on high and say, well, you have that seat, you'll have this seat. But actually, doesn't that take away choice from voters in constituencies? And what happens if somebody who wants to vote Reform arrives at the ballot box to realise that there's only a Conservative?
I think, but all main parties will stand candidates in every single seat. But they won't campaign hard whether they don't want to.
I think that will. I think that means the whole thing won't work. So, for example, in my seat, before the general election, the Reform candidate submitted his nomination with an hour to spare. No campaigning, no leaflets to speak of, 10,000 votes. Because people want to vote for Nigel Farage, and it doesn't matter whether they don't deliver a single leaflet, they will get the vote. So I think if they do a deal but still have Reform candidates stand, it will...
Have they told you that they wouldn't campaign in your seat, and then they did?
I had no communication from Reform Party.
I wonder why they declared so late. I don't know why that is. I think...
Maybe you could ask...
It was disorganised. I mean, I know that Reform... And, I have sympathy with them. It's a new party. They didn't have the structure. And so in quite a number of areas, it was a last-minute appointment. But there was no agreement, as far as I know. You need to get a Reform person in. But there was absolutely no agreement in any constituency not to put up a candidate. Of course, Gavin Williamson, my neighbour, played a blinder because he said he knew the candidate and he said, look, if you stand, you're not going to get elected. What you are going to do is get a Labour guy elected. Is that what you want? So the Reform guy, at the very last minute...
Pulled out.
pulled out, and it was done at the very last minute. Otherwise, Reform would have appointed someone else to replace him.
But my point, though, is that it's all very well saying, oh, well, we just won't campaign. But I don't actually think leaflets and door-knocking make as much difference as people think. And people will vote for the party. If they want to vote for Nigel Farage, if they want to vote for Reform, they will, even if they've had a leaflet.
Well, no one takes advice from me. I've been around this game for 30 years. I know that Farage was really put out by 2019 when he stood down about 300 candidates to allow the Tories to win that big landslide 80-seat majority under Johnson to deliver Brexit, and so it goes on. But he's really hurt. Yeah. But no one said thank you. He got no help.
I said to Boris Johnson, I can tell you. I said to Boris Johnson, you're just lining up trouble. Yeah. If, A, you don't acknowledge the huge role that Nigel Farage played in getting us Brexit, and not giving him a knighthood or even a peerage. And you know what? If you'd given him a peerage, unless he decided to do a Tony Benn and stand down, he wouldn't have been able to be an MP.
But can I say, Chris, finally, the reason why that matters is you want to do a deal, you do it now. You don't allow Reform to appoint people to the seats, because he won't stand them down. So the time to do it in the cycle is now, not in 2 years' time. By then he's selected his best seats, he won't want to stand them down. Indeed. The clock is ticking for Kevin Badenoch and Nigel Farage.
Is there a case for proportional representation?
No way. You know, people criticise Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu and his government. Now, Israel is a complete Western democracy, but they have proportional representation. And just like in Germany, which also has slightly less proportional representation than Israel, you've got to get into bed with some pretty unsavoury characters. I mean, we had to get into bed with the Lib Dems. That was bad enough. But this is well-known extremists. We don't want to get extremists getting elected and then in government.
If I can, I've got to bring you news from lobby. I've been in a lobby meeting with the PM's deputy official spokesman. All quite quiet, but the Labour MPs have tabled an amendment calling for a 4-day working week. The government's confirmed this is not government policy to support a 4-day working week. Is that a relief for you, Michael Fabricant?
Well, speaking about government policy, of course, we've had a new health minister appointed after the sacking of Andrew Gwynn, and she had some interesting views. I think she doesn't like single-sex toilets, and she thinks people can identify as llamas. Here's what Lee Anderson, the Reform MP, had to say.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Now, the new health minister has stated that it's OK for a human being to present as a llama. So what I want to know is, if I have a family member who presents as a llama, suddenly becomes ill in the middle of the night, do they send for a doctor, a vet, or a straitjacket?
Mr. Speaker, I can just say to the honourable member that my honourable friend, the Minister for Public Health, believes in treating every human being with the dignity and respect they deserve, even the honourable gentleman.
Michael, I mean, this health minister, surely she's retracted her views on llamas.
She hasn't. No, she's sticking with it. I mean, I've got a soft spot for llamas. I've got to reveal this in GB News. A friend of mine, a broadcaster and ex-member of Parliament, actually, Matthew Parris.
Oh, yes.
Famously, because he wrote it up in the Times because he was very annoyed with me, I was going to buy one of his llamas, because I share a property with a well-known friend of mine in Wales, and we wanted a couple of llamas there, and we didn't get them in the end for complicated reasons. But I'll have nothing said against llamas. I'm very fond of them. In fact, I got told off many years ago when I was saying that I love llamas. And someone said, no, this sounds like bestiality, Michael.
Can I just go back to what she said?
You surely don't identify as one.
She made these comments on Twitter before she was an MP, in her defence. OK, and she did say, she was asked, you know, should people be taken seriously if they want to be a llama? She replied, yes, and treat you with dignity and respect. So before she's an MP, you all had lives before your MPs. She said things being judged by them. But on WhatsApp groups, Michael, I was going to ask you, what's the worst thing you've ever seen on a WhatsApp group? You must have seen some quite...
I've seen some horrendous things on WhatsApp group, but I was just thinking the sort of thing that she was saying before she was an MP, I've been saying, as you well know, because you follow me on Twitter when I was an MP.
We're going to have to leave it there. I think the best ones are when people post photos to the wrong group. That's always quite amusing. Quickly delete. Well, anyway, there's lots more still to come between now and 5 o'clock. And someone who probably did not believe you could identify as a llama 50 years ago today, Mrs. Thatcher, became the Tory leader. But what is her legacy? First of all, we've got your news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you. The top stories. The High Court has ruled that the Metropolitan Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. The force's vetting procedures have been found to be unlawful. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London. Ms Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believe it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." She also said she will not be pursuing any legal costs. The UK did not sign a leaders' declaration at the climax of the AI Action Summit in Paris because it does not reflect the government's position on opportunity and security for the technology, Downing Street said. Britain declined to back the joint communiqué because it had concerns about the level of practical clarity it offered on global governance of artificial intelligence, Number 10 said. Downing Street denied the move was related to reports that the US had questioned the declaration's wording, which is said to include references to sustainable and inclusive AI. And former Scottish footballer and Manchester United striker Denis Law has been laid to rest today. Many former players and managers were in attendance, including former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson, Paul Scholes, Peter Schmeichel, Wayne Rooney, Ruud van Nistelrooy. They were all also there to pay their respects today. Members of the public have been paying their respects, and Old Trafford projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law died last month at the age of 84. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing, but where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These are most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. It could take a little while to clear. A cloudier story further east, and there could be some rain around as well. Similar for much of Northern Ireland and down across the eastern side of England, pretty cloudy, some drizzly outbreaks of rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet pushing its way through, but a brighter start perhaps for some parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, but here again we could have some fog or freezing fog patches to watch out for. As we go through the day tomorrow, most places staying grey and cloudy, still a few outbreaks of light rain towards the east, only one or two making their way further west. Western parts again, the best chance of seeing some brightness, perhaps a little bit more of that than today. Temperatures may be up a degree or so, but still feeling pretty chilly. Unsurprising, it is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In West Yorkshire, the M62 westbound is queuing after a collision earlier between Huddersfield at junction 23 and Rishworth Moor at junction 22. In South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, the A61 Sheffield Parkway, that's still shut for a police investigation, closed between Park Square roundabout and Derrick Dooley Way. In Warwickshire, the M42 northbound is partly blocked after a collision between Coes Hill at junction 7 and junction 8 for the M6, with queues back to Birmingham Airport at junction 6. And in Surrey, delays on the M25 anti-clockwise in the roadworks between Chertsey at junction 11 and junction 10 for the A3.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Welcome back. It's 21 minutes to 5. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Now, today marks 50 years since Margaret Thatcher became the leader of the Conservative Party. She was known as the Iron Lady and she went on to become the nation's first female leader, winning 3 general elections. But will she always be remembered as a milk snatcher or for ripping apart the mining communities? Well, joining us now to discuss her legacy is former aide to Margaret Thatcher, Niall Gardner. Niall, thank you so much for joining us from the United States. You knew Thatcher well. What do you think she would think of the current state of Britain?
Well, great to see you, Miriam. Many thanks for having me on the show today. And I think that my former boss, Margaret Thatcher, would have been really appalled by the current state of Britain. And you have a far-left socialist government headed by Keir Starmer, who, frankly, is a complete charlatan, I think, as Prime Minister. And I think she would have been absolutely horrified by the fact that you now have probably the most left-wing government in British history heading the country. And she would have called on Conservatives in the United Kingdom to really to stand up to socialist tyranny, and she would have urged the British people to really to fight for their freedom at this time. And unfortunately, we do have a disastrous British government that is humiliating Britain on the international stage. And her message would have been loud and clear that Conservatives have to fight for conservative principles, ideals, and for the foundations of liberty and freedom. And we're seeing all of those being trampled upon by the socialists in charge of Britain at this time.
Of course, many people would credit Thatcher for the opening up and the restoration of the UK economy in the 1980s, and we did have a period of growth. But there was also a legacy that was perhaps not so positive, particularly in the north, closing down of industry, a legacy that perhaps still survives today. Do you think there are aspects of her policies that, were she alive today, she would have regretted?
I don't think so. I think with Margaret Thatcher, she always stood on her record, her principles, and I think she would never have backed down in terms of her policies. And she was very much of the view that Britain needed to be great again, really. And she restored British greatness on the international stage, made Britain competitive, and she stood up to the Stalinist left, actually, and she really saved Britain, I think, from socialist tyranny. It's unfortunate that we've seen the socialists return to power now, and I think that Keir Starmer's Labour Party is just as bad, frankly, as the 1970s socialists who are destroying Britain. But she restored, I think, confidence once again in the British nation. She demonstrated that clearly, of course, with the Falklands War and the great victory over Argentina. And she put pride back, I think, into the British spirit, really. And we greatly need to see that sense of self-confidence returning to the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, I think that the state of Britain today is absolutely horrendous. And the socialists will try to destroy everything. They did so in the 1970s. They're doing so again today. And Britain needs to be liberated once again from the spectre of socialist tyranny, frankly.
I think what's striking, watching videos of Thatcher now, speaking 40, 50 years ago. I mean, I was born during her premiership, but I was only 7, I think, when she left office, so I don't really remember her speaking at the time. But I think what strikes me is just how confident, how articulate, how bold she was, and that kind of extraordinary authority that she carried, even in a parliament that back then had hardly any female MPs. She was facing a wall of male MPs there. But she didn't have an easy start, did she? And there was certainly a couple of years after she'd been elected as leader that a lot of the Conservative Party thought that she wouldn't last. What advice do you think she'd give Kemi Badenoch now, who's also facing an uphill struggle for different reasons?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, Margaret Thatcher faced huge opposition from the what was then the establishment of the Conservative Party, including a lot of wets. And I think that, you know, the fact that the Conservatives are trailing so heavily in the polls today has much to do with the fact that in recent years you've had wets in the Conservative Party who have tried to undermine Margaret Thatcher's legacy and vision. I think her advice to Kemi Badenoch and the new leadership of the Conservative Party is to stand firm on Conservative principles. And the Conservative Party has to stand clearly for Conservative values. And that, of course, includes limited government, low taxes, secure borders. And the Conservatives really have to, I think, regain that Thatcherite spirit, which they certainly lost under Rishi Sunak. I think Sunak's premiership was absolutely disastrous for the...
Niall, one of the things that she was known for was really pushing into the special relationship with the United States, that famous friendship with her and Reagan. What do you think she would think of the state of that special relationship now, particularly with it under strain over the Chagos Island deals and potentially tariffs as well from the Trump government?
Yeah, I think she would have been greatly saddened by the current state of the special relationship because it is fundamentally broken under Keir Starmer. And this is the responsibility of the Labour government here. In the United States, you have a very pro-British president with Donald Trump, who really wants a very powerful special relationship, but you have a useless Labour Party in charge in the UK at this time. And what the socialists are doing with regard to the Chagos Islands is an absolute abomination, giving away sovereign British territory, really as a gift, frankly, to communist China, undermining the future of the vital US military base at Diego Garcia. And what Labour is doing here is they're fundamentally destroying the US-UK special relationship, which is really the beating heart of the free world. And Margaret Thatcher greatly loved the United States, the American people. She was a firm believer in the importance of the special relationship, but Keir Starmer has set the special relationship on fire at this time, trying to destroy it. And I think that what Starmer's doing is so incredibly dangerous. And what he's doing with regard to the Chagos Islands is absolute treason, really, traitorous, handing a huge gift to communist China.
Of course. Now, of course, we've yet to see whether or not that deal will go ahead and what Donald Trump will do, if anything, about it. But of course, some would say that the imposing tariffs on Britain, for example, might also be threatening the special relationship.
Well, I think that thanks to Brexit, actually, the UK will avoid US tariffs. And it's important that the US and the UK move forward with a trade agreement. And I hope that Keir Starmer actually wakes up to the importance of a US-UK trade deal. I think certainly the Americans want to do a deal.
No, we're going to have to leave it there. I'm so sorry. But Niall Gardner, thank you so much for joining us on this 50th anniversary of Thatcher being elected as leader. Now, if, like Thatcher, you've had enough of the wets and want some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Can't wait to get in that sea.
Lovely and warm.
Just like the feeling of having great travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Plenty of cloud elsewhere across Europe. Could also turn showery at times. These showers turning increasingly thundery as we head into Thursday for some. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, though it could be breezy at times across the Canary Islands. But as we move our way further east, much more cloud, also some showers at times. These could start to turn thundery across parts of Croatia, Albania and also parts of Greece as we head into Thursday. So those showers continuing for some, drier elsewhere with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Aaron McLean, the goal machine here, used to play for Peterborough United. You bagged loads of goals for them back in the day. But I've got a bone to pick with you, young man. You scored at the City ground against Nottingham Forest for, was it Hull City?
For Hull City, yeah.
Why did you do that?
Well, that was my job, unfortunately. I must say, that was actually one of my favourite goals.
Was it really?
Because I remember, obviously, playing at the City ground, unbelievable stadium, historic.
It is great.
So, and we beat you 1-0.
OK, no need to rubbish it. These sports clubs, whether it's football or rugby or whatever, should offer two alternatives, either a professional footballer, or if you don't quite make it, you can still go and play football at a lower level, but have a career as well, maybe be an electrician or a plumber.
100%. You know, listen, I've had multiple conversations with various different people, whether it's the PFA or whether it's clubs. Even players who do have careers, you know, there's so many that don't make it and don't quite make it to the level or only play at a lower level. There's so many that do have long careers, but once you come to the end of that, you've spent, you know, for me, I spent 20 years as a professional footballer. Once I finished playing, what do you then do for the rest of your life? You know, at 35, once you retire, you still have to have a purpose in life. Yeah. But I'd almost be starting from ground zero. I'm fortunate that I went into coaching and then went into the media.
That's good.
But for every one of me, there's hundreds that don't. And I've got so many friends who, I've got to say, you know, have really, really struggled on the, you know, mental health side.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually, because you go from, like, playing in stadiums, big stadiums, small stadiums, crowds, singing your name, and all that sort of stuff, that adulation, the buzz of winning games, and, you know, the downs of losing games, and you go from that to sort of nothing when you finish. I mean, that's a big come down there.
It's a huge come down.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, and it's been a big day for the assisted suicide bill as a committee in Parliament starts its line-by-line scrutiny of that bill. And in a significant development, previously the bill said that a High Court judge must check that each person is eligible for assisted suicide and hadn't been coerced. But overnight, Kim Leadbeater, sponsoring the bill, has claimed that we no longer need a High Court judge and that there will be different expertise to improve the bill. Now, joining me now for the latest is former Conservative MP Tom Hunt. Do you think this bill's in trouble, Tom?
I think it is in trouble, and I think it was, I mean, the significance of her withdrawing that safeguard, because I think there was over 60 MPs who are on record for citing that particular safeguard as being a key reason why they voted for it in second reading. So that's now gone. Yeah. And the fact that it was just ripped out at 10 p.m, the evening before the line-by-line scrutiny of a bill, I think it's caused significant alarm. All of the momentum seems to be in the direction of those who oppose the bill. Today, for example, Lee Anderson has switched from having voted in favour to voting against. He supports the principle, but he's deeply uncomfortable with the shenanigans that have been going on with the committee. I mean, today we've had Sarah Olney had an amendment to try
Lib Dem MP.
Lib Dem MP, and she had a very reasonable amendment to try and raise a bar when it comes to assessing an individual's ability to make this serious decision, moving it from just capacity to ability and a definition of ability. That was being rejected by Kim Levitt-Vita. I mean, interestingly, there's 35 plus clauses they've got to get through. They'd be doing well if they complete one clause today. I mean, who would have thought this is quite a complex issue, right?
That's right. Yes, and people are now saying that even those in favour of the principle, that this should not be done in a private member's bill because there is so little opportunity for that scrutiny.
This is a sham. The committee is a sham. Whatever we think about this issue, it's a life and death issue. The stakes couldn't be higher, and it seems as though it's almost being run as a campaign to win. With all the tricks associated with that, all the stacked witness lists, the stacked membership, deeply inappropriate. I think the momentum is with our side, and I really, really hope that this dangerous bill doesn't see the light of day and that enough MPs see sense and switch. We don't need that many to switch. We need less than 30 to switch, and we have a different outcome at third reading, and I think we might be getting there.
And very quickly, one of the issues today has been over this idea of mental capacity, and with those opposed to the bill saying that it's one thing to say that you want to refuse treatment, but another to have the capacity to say you want to die. Yeah, I mean, the Mental Capacity Act was never meant for decisions like this, so Sarah Olney had a very reasonable amendment to raise a bar when it comes to assessing ability to make this decision, and it was the amendment was jettisoned by and the role of the ministers in this committee is very, very peculiar. Danny Kruger described it slightly Jekyll and Hyde, and I'd say that's not a bad interpretation of their behaviour today. Well, it's certainly shone a spotlight on parliamentary processes, and of course we'll be following that bill all the way through. Thank you, Tom Hunt, so much for joining me. Plenty more to come. Don't go anywhere. We've got lots more to come on the programme, including the latest on that Met Police judgment from the High Court.
A chilly start will give way to a lovely, warm afternoon. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing. But where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning, and could take a little while to clear. A cloudier story further east, and there could be some rain around as well. Similar for much of Northern Ireland and down across the eastern side of England, pretty cloudy, some drizzly outbreaks of rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet pushing its way through, but a brighter start perhaps for some parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, but here again we could have some fog or freezing fog patches to watch out for. As we go through the day tomorrow, most places staying grey and cloudy, still a few outbreaks of light rain towards the east, only one or two making their way further west. Western parts again, the best chance of seeing some brightness, perhaps a little bit more of that than today. Temperatures may be up a degree or so, but still pretty chilly. Unsurprising, it is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Alan Wright. In West Yorkshire, the M62 westbound is queuing after a collision between junction 23 for Huddersfield and 22 for Rishworth Moor. In South Yorkshire, in Sheffield, the A61 Sheffield Parkway, that's still shut both ways for a police investigation, closed between Duke Street and Derek Dooley Way. In Surrey at Thursley, the A3 is queuing southbound. That's after a breakdown just after the Bullhead Green turn-off. In Hampshire, the M27 westbound is partly blocked after a collision, and that's between Junction 7 for Hedge End and the A334 and Junction 5 for Southampton Airport and the A335 turn-off, so do expect delays.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British giveaway with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16 along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, it's 5 o'clock. Welcome to the Martin Daubney Show on GB News with me, Miriam Kate, and we are broadcasting live from the heart of Westminster and, of course, all across the UK. Now, the Met Police say that there will be more dangerous officers like Wayne Couzens in the force after a bombshell High Court ruling means that they can't sack staff who failed vetting procedures.
Those we've removed vetting from had a pattern of behaviour that meant that if they applied to work in policing today, we would never let them in.
And Conservative MPs seem to be at war over how best to tackle the threat of Reform UK, as Kemi Badenoch dismisses a pact as for the birds. And any minute now, Donald Trump will meet the King of Jordan at the White House after he threatened to withhold aid from the country in the Middle East. As always, please do send in your views and comments at gbnews.com/your say. But first, time for the news headlines with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much and good afternoon. The top stories. Breaking news. A National Police Chiefs Council spokesperson has said this afternoon that police officers and staff should always be held to the highest standards, and we must ensure that only those who are suitable to wear the uniform To enter and remain in policing, we need clear routes for action to remove individuals who fall below those standards. Now, those comments come as the High Court ruled the Met Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault, allegations which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Metropolitan Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley said the force will be seeking an appeal on the judgment.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
2 bodies found in a river in Aberdeen have been identified as those of sisters Eliza and Henrietta Husty, who went missing in January, Police Scotland have said. The sisters, who were both aged 32, were last seen on CCTV on Market Street at Victoria Bridge over the River Dee in Aberdeen. Police also say there do not appear to be any suspicious circumstances. Chelsea footballer Sam Kerr, who called a Metropolitan Police officer stupid and white in January 2023, has been found not guilty of causing racially aggravated harassment. The Australian international made the comments to PC Stephen Lovell during an incident in southwest London. She said she regretted the way she expressed herself, but added, "I feel the message was still relevant." Ms Kerr denied using whiteness as an insult and claimed, "I believed it was him using his power and privilege over me because he was accusing me of being something I'm not." Labour officials were warned about offensive WhatsApp group messages before the comments were made public, it's been claimed today. Burnley MP Oliver Ryan's the second MP to be suspended by Labour. Greater Manchester Police said a non-crime hate incident had been recorded after the comments emerged and former Health Minister Andrew Gwynn was sacked. Gerald Cooney, the former Labour leader of Tameside Council, said he raised concerns about Andrew Gwynn's remarks several times in the past year. Labour sources said no formal complaint had been received about the WhatsApp group. Baroness Jackie Smith spoke to GB News.
We're not the nasty party. What we are is the decisive party. When the Prime Minister got the evidence of these messages, which I agree with you are completely unacceptable, what he did was to sack the Minister and to suspend from the Labour Party both of the MPs that were involved. Now, that stands in pretty stark contrast with previous Prime Ministers who faffed about the place and allowed senior ministers to stay in their roles when they had clearly breached the ministerial code. That's the difference that we're seeing.
In other news, the UK did not sign a leaders' declaration at the climax of the AI Action Summit in Paris because it does not reflect the government's position on opportunity and security for the technology. That's coming from Downing Street. Britain declined to back the joint communiqué because it had concerns about the level of practical clarity it offered on global governance of artificial intelligence. Coming from number 10, Downing Street denied the move was related to reports that the US had questioned the declaration's wording, which is said to include references to sustainable and inclusive AI. US President Donald Trump said the Israel-Hamas ceasefire should be cancelled if hostages held at Gaza are not returned on time. Terror group Hamas announced last night that they'll delay hostage releases planned for Saturday until further notice. President Trump said late last night that if all the hostages held in Gaza are not returned by Saturday at noon, he would propose cancelling the ceasefire. And Sir Alex Ferguson led the tributes to Denis Law as the football community paid their final respects to the King in Manchester, saying he was one of the greatest players at Man United and all time. The former Manchester United manager Sir Alex Ferguson was in attendance alongside Paul Scholes, Peter Schmeichel, Wayne Rooney, Gary Neville, Ruud van Nistelrooy and others. Members of the public also paid their respects, and Old Trafford projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law remains the only Scottish player to have ever won the Ballon d'Or, and no man has scored more goals for the national team. He died last month at the age of 84. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in half an hour.
Welcome back, and we can cross now to Washington, D.C., where moments ago Donald Trump met with the King of Jordan, King Abdullah III. Now, this comes after President Trump had threatened to withhold aid from the Middle Eastern country if it refuses to take in Palestinians under the US plan to take over Gaza. So that's Donald Trump there meeting King Abdullah in Washington. And of course, we can expect to see lots of these scenes over the coming few years as Trump welcomes a number of different world leaders to the White House. Very interesting to see who he invites first. I wonder at what point Keir Starmer will be standing in that position.
You think he'll listen to you?
President Trump there. Well, back to UK news, and the Met Police have warned that there will be more dangerous officers like Wayne Couzens in the force after a High Court ruling means that hundreds of officers accused of sexual and domestic abuse could be reinstated. Well, joining me now in the studio is Home and Security Editor Mark White. Now, of course, this was all sparked by the dreadful, horrific murder of Sarah Everard and the revelations that actually her murderer had behaved in a way that perhaps could have flagged him up as a potential criminal in the past. And as a result of that, Mark Rowley implemented this kind of new checking system. But what's happened today?
Well, today is a case related to another police officer, Sergeant Lino Di Maria, who had a number of allegations made against him while he was a serving police officer. Those allegations have never resulted in anything in terms of any formal investigation or charges, any criminal proceedings that have found him guilty. So in the eyes of the law, he's innocent. The police, though, because of the slew of allegations in vetting him, feel that, you know, there's enough there to point to bad character and that they should revoke his vetting. In other words, then he should have his warrant card also revoked and he should no longer be a police officer. He should be dismissed. But he has challenged that. He went to the High Court, got a judicial review, and the judge has come down in his favour, saying that in terms of his human rights under Article 6 of the Human Rights Act, he has not had recourse to sort of challenge any of the allegations in any proper process here. And that's why the Metropolitan Police Federation took this case up on behalf of this officer, have challenged it and said it's all well and good trying to root out corrupt officers, but you need to do it within the law. The Met Police were working outside the law here, and we need a change of law to ensure that they have that particular power to do that. The Home Office have said that they are now urgently looking to change the law, but to be honest, successive Home Secretaries have been asked about this. They've all said, oh yes, we'll do it, and none have. So now the ball is firmly in the court of Yvette Cooper to see if she actually will do anything about it. This is what the Met Police Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, said a few hours ago.
Today's ruling on the law has left policing in a hopeless position. We now have no mechanism to rid the Met officers who are not fit to hold vetting. Those who cannot be trusted to work with women, or those who cannot be trusted to enter the homes of vulnerable people. It is absolutely absurd that we cannot lawfully sack them.
So as far as the Met is concerned, there's about 29 officers who are in the process of being dismissed through this Operation Assure. They are going to be sitting at home getting paid on full salary until this matter is resolved, because clearly, in light of what happened to Sarah Everard, there's no way that the Met Commissioner could countenance having officers back in with all these allegations, whether they've gone and been proven in the court of law or not. There's so many allegations over certain officers that they feel it just would not be safe to put them back in public-facing jobs, or back indeed in the job at all. So they're sitting there until we get this change in the law so that they can be dismissed.
Which, as you say, successive Home Secretaries have attempted.
They've all failed.
Potentially because that primary legislation would conflict with the ECHR. Potentially that could be a barrier. Well, we'll see. Well, viewers may remember Py Stevenson, who was arrested at a vigil after the death of Sarah Everard. And Patsy joins us now to give her reaction to that High Court ruling. Patsy, thank you so much for joining us. How do you feel finding out that the Met can't actually get rid of officers who have faced severe allegations against their character?
Yeah, it's a bit ridiculous, because I think unless the justice system works, we can't do that, because at the moment they're saying, well, if someone's proven to be innocent, then we can't do anything about it because it's just allegations. But we know that the majority of sexual assault allegations, they're so hard to prove that you could be putting police officers who have abused women in the police force with a warrant card who could abuse women further. And it's not just, you know, okay, if they go through the courts, it's one thing, and then they say they get proven as innocent. Okay, that's one thing that women have to deal with. But then to give them a job in a police uniform, I can't understand why this is happening. I think this is probably one of the only times where me and Mark Rowley are standing on the same side, and that's absolutely crazy.
Yeah. Of course, one of the tragic elements of the Sarah Everard case was that Wayne Couzens had previously behaved in a way that should have been a red flag, and he should have been removed from duty. And now we're potentially in that position again, where there are police officers who perhaps have indicated that they might behave like that, but still have to be allowed to keep their jobs. I mean, what would you like to see happen next? Do we need a change in the law?
I mean, yeah, of course, we need a change in the justice system by itself as well. But I mean, you know, one of the officers that arrested me has been promoted since. You know, police aren't held accountable for their actions. They still aren't. So if Mark Rowley is saying we want to hold them to account, I would fully support something like that. But I just don't understand how people think, well, if it's an allegation, then it's just an allegation. It's usually there's no smoke without fire. I would never put someone who's got an allegation of sexual assault, 2 sexual assaults in the case of the sergeant that we're talking about. He has 2 counts of sexual assault allegations and 1 of domestic violence. Why is he even being considered to be a police officer? That's ridiculous.
But I suppose some police officers might say, yes, that does seem to be an extreme case, but then there are other police officers who, you know, sadly, vexatious complaints do happen. And how do police management determine what's a vexatious allegation that should not end a good officer's career, and what actually should be a red flag that stimulates further investigation?
Well, that's the thing, is that they don't have that in place. So at the moment, they shouldn't be hiring. If you can't distinguish who's going to be abusive and who's not, then you shouldn't be hiring. And I think realistically, I mean, my stance on police is always to defund them anyway. And I know people go against that, but I could explain that another time. But realistically, you know, we're not in a position where women are safe, or Black people are safe, or gay people are safe. You know, the Met is institutionally racist, misogynistic, homophobic. I can go on and on and on. So for them to say, listen, we want to fire people who have allegations against them, realistically, it seems like a step in the right direction. So I prefer it if they were able to do that.
Py Stevenson there, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you for your time. And I should make clear that the sergeant in question today, Lino Di Maria, he contests all the allegations and says that he is innocent of those allegations. Well, moving on, hundreds of thousands of government contracts are being searched and exposed by an X account inspired by the work of Elon Musk's Doge department. One post claims that £1.5 billion will be spent over 7 years on the Greener Futures Partnership to decarbonise housing. Now, is this complete woke waste of money? Let's talk to GB News reporter Adam Cherrier. And you've been doing a bit of digging on this topic, haven't you?
Still got the dossier, Miriam, yeah. So there's a lot of this out there. And we and others, as you mentioned, the procurement files, Guido Fawkes are doing one. We spoke to Charlotte Gill, who's founded Woke Waste. Everyone's looking into this, and it's getting a lot more attention recently, not just because of Elon Musk's actions across the pond in the US, but also because here, public expenditure as a percentage of GDP is absolutely skyrocketing in this country. The size of the state is massive, something like 45% of GDP, and people know where their money is going. And if you start digging around, you'll find lots of individually quite small examples of what seem like wasteful spending, but collectively add up to quite a lot. So you mentioned one there from the procurement files. They've done another one saying the UK taxpayer will spend £25 million to support green urban growth in Somalia. If you go on the NHS's job vacancies website, their job board, you'll find one. Just today I found this one in Manchester, an equality, diversity and inclusion partner, £52,000 a year. They, of course, also have a team leader who's the head of equality, diversity and inclusion, so it's a whole network. The post holder will be line managed by that team member, but there will be some travel required, so it's quite an intense job. Luckily, you are given the option of hybrid working. There are a bunch of others. I've got a lot
space
here.
in your bedroom.
Yeah, you know, right. So HMRC, I investigated this a couple of years ago. They had a race delivery program which had 17 full-time staff, a total budget in 2022-2023 of 1.5 million, 3 million over 2 years. So again, the point is, you might look at one or two of these and think, OK.
Yeah,
but now there's momentum against looking at all of this in the round and saying, hold on, is this providing value? And even the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, the reason I bring up the Manchester, that NHS job in particular, is because last week Wes Streeting said a lot of this stuff, I'm not quoting him verbatim, but he essentially said is not useful and is a bit silly and not providing value, and yet it continues to pop up. And in fairness, I saw this repeatedly under previous governments as well, where they would say they're trying to crack down on this. Jeremy Hunt said he was trying to row back on it when he was Chancellor, and it didn't happen. We spoke about this in the last hour, and you say part of that reason is because it's the Equality Act is sort of mandating it, and there's a counter-argument to that is, well, yeah, but some of that can be absorbed into existing the existing HR remit. I think the scale of this now and the attention it's getting is new and fresh and perhaps will lead to a change.
Well, one of the funding streams that I think is quite interesting is government funding of academic research. And I think people, if they're aware that government does fund academic research, you'd think that they would fund potential cures for cancer or public interest like that. And yet some of the funding is going to the most obscure and frankly completely ideas that have no consensus at all, like, you know, how can a trans man breastfeed? You know, that's one of the ones that this account's picked up. Why does the government fund academic research like that?
Well, it's a good question, isn't it? They also, it's hidden in plain sight. It's not like you can't find this stuff yourself quite easily, actually, and that's why ththese accounts are so successful. They're doing a good job, but there's just so much of it. They're pumping out and finally giving some attention to it. And like I said, perhaps there's a sea change on this, and it is certainly helped by what's happening in the US, and often those sorts of things trickle down into UK culture as well. Perhaps there's a change, and finally seeing the government make some signals on this as well. Perhaps there'll be movement on this in the near future.
Well, we need the people who are in charge of spending decisions to say, no, we don't need that role, no, we don't. But that's perhaps we're a long way off in the NHS. Let's see. Adam Cherry, thank you so much for that report. And please do send in any examples you can find of woke waste. Well, do you fancy your chance to be one of 2 lucky winners in the current Great British Giveaway? Well, here are all the details that you need.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16 along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrants must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, coming up next, the King has met with Muslim and Jewish faith leaders at Buckingham Palace. I'm Miriam Cates on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m. Apparently, in 1991, I took out an insurance on my computer, which I have no recollection of at all. But recently, I've had a foreign voice ring me and say, unless I pay the £1,000 immediately, they'll take it out of my bank account.
They wouldn't have access to your bank account.
No, they have no access to my bank account. And what you should do, to begin with, you feel frightened. And you think, my God, £1,000 coming up, what do I do? And then Neil, my partner, said, just ignore it. And that's what you've got to do. But they are persistent.
So threatening as well.
And we changed we changed the number and everything. And still, they managed to get through to you. And we told the bank not to accept any £1,000 checks, something like that. But it is awful. But I say to your viewers and listeners, please, please ignore these phone calls.
Yes.
Even if at the end of the day it's true and they do come and collect £1,000 legally, don't do anything about it. Just ignore it.
Yeah. I think there's an organisation you can phone which is anti-scammer.
Is there?
They can do a lot of this stuff for you. I'm no help to you because I don't know what it is.
Well, I might look into that because it is worrying, you know, to begin with, and then they are so persistent.
Yeah.
That is the thing.
My mum had a similar thing the other day, and this is a good tip to remember. And her bank rang her up and said it was her bank, and they needed to get into her account immediately because someone had hacked her account and they were taking her money out. So it's automatically the panic.
Yeah.
You're losing money. Yeah. And they said, just share the one-time password that's about to come to your phone. And at that point, she went, no, you should never share your one-time password.
No.
Anybody asks you to do that, it's a scam.
No,
phone
exactly.
Back. So just a good one to remember.
Yeah, yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point.
He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 23 minutes past 5. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Well, some royal news because the King today has hosted Muslim and Jewish faith leaders at Buckingham Palace. And they've signed agreements for interfaith solidarity amid rising tensions between the faiths in the country. Well, joining us now is GB News royal correspondent Cameron Walker. Cameron, what's the latest on the King and Queen's visit today?
Hi, Miriam. Yes, these agreements are known as the Reconciliation Accords, and they were signed, as you said, by Jewish and Muslim leaders here in central London, just a stone's throw from Buckingham Palace, called Spencer House. It's all after a meeting that took place at a Scottish castle last month where they thrashed out the details. But Buckingham Palace has said this afternoon that this framework will create an enduring collaboration and understanding, ensuring Jewish and Muslim communities can navigate challenges together while fostering mutual respect and solidarity. Now, after the accords were signed, as I said, very close to Buckingham Palace, they all walked, Muslim and Jewish leaders, together through Green Park into Buckingham Palace through the North Gate behind me to meet the King. So the King could hear all about what they had discussed and what they had signed. And the King said, I'm so glad to hear about this marvellous exercise. We know that the King places a huge importance on interfaith harmony, as he has done for a number of decades, putting religious leaders together, all about building trust, mutual respect and, crucially, peace, particularly in the United Kingdom. And the chief rabbi in the UK and the chief imam have spoken on camera together, and this is what they said about the King's involvement.
Majesty the King places an enormous amount of emphasis on harmony amongst faiths and within our society, and as soon as he heard about this initiative, he decided that he wanted to give it his blessing, and that's why we were in the palace today, to give him a copy of the Accords.
The King has been a champion for interfaith work and dialogue, and it was lovely to be with him and to gain his blessings for this.
Now, of course, all of this is happening in the context of an increasingly fragile ceasefire in Gaza, sparked, of course, that war by the October 7th attacks by Hamas on Israel, which led to a rise of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia here in the United Kingdom and indeed across the world. But the religious leaders here in London today didn't want to focus on a conflict that's happening thousands of miles away. They really wanted to focus on these new accords. And in the words of the chief rabbi, it represents a bold first step, rebuilding trust between Muslim and Jewish communities in the United Kingdom long term. And it looks like the king and the aristocracy here in the United Kingdom are supporting them to do that.
The King takes his role as defender of the faith very, very seriously. I think the Princess of Wales has also been on a visit today, Cameron, has she?
Yeah, she has indeed. She's been visiting a women's prison to a mother and baby unit. It's all about her mission, really, to place an importance on early childhood development. The idea being that if a child has a poor start in life, the chances of addiction or mental health problems when they get to adulthood just increases tenfold, essentially. So she was visiting a mother and baby unit inside the prison. And what the prisoners were telling her, because she spoke to a number of inmates, was it's really sad that in order to get the support they've got in the prison, because they do have a very good programme for child development inside the prison, they've had to be put in prison in the first place, i.e. there's not enough support in the outside world in Britain for mothers and babies. So the Princess was hearing about that and clearly shining a spotlight on the facilities here. It's part of her patronage Action for Children that runs the support in that women's prison.
And, of course, we understand that Princess Kate is in remission from cancer, but is her schedule back up to its previous intensity, or is she still taking it slowly?
Well, they're certainly calling it a gradual return to public duties, but if you go by the last few weeks, it's certainly been a number of engagements the Princess of Wales has indeed carried out. There was a bit of confusion earlier on today where a Kensington Palace spokesperson appeared to backtrack on what they previously told the Sunday Times last week about whether or not they would be releasing details of the Princess of Wales's outfits. They said in the Sunday Times that it was the reason being is they want everyone to focus on her work rather than what she's wearing. It appears they've now backtrack on that and said nothing's changed. So to cut a long story short, essentially, I doubt we're going to get an update on the day-to-day engagements, but for engagements such as massive state visits, which are happening in Buckingham Palace, or a royal tour, I suspect we are going to hear about what the Princess of Wales is wearing, and particularly whether or not she's championing British designers.
Indeed. Cameron Walker there with all the latest royal news. Thank you so much, Cameron. Well, there's lots more still to come on this show between now and 6 o'clock, including a shock new poll that has Reform UK surging to its higher figure so far. But first, your latest news headline with Tatiana Sanchez.
Miriam, thank you very much. The top stories. A National Police Chiefs Council spokesperson says police officers and staff should always be held to the highest standards, and we must ensure that only those who are suitable to wear the uniform enter and remain in policing. Those comments come as the High Court ruled the Met Police cannot dismiss officers by removing their vetting clearance. Sergeant Lino Di Maria successfully mounted a legal challenge after having his vetting removed over sexual assault allegations, which he denies. He was found to have no case to answer in respect of misconduct allegations and argued that having his vetting removed without the accusations being proved is a breach of his right to a fair trial. Spain's former football chief, Luis Rubiales, says he asked player Jenny Hermoso if he could kiss her. Rubiales is currently being cross-examined as he stands trial for kissing Hermoso. He is accused of sexual assault and then attempting to coerce her into publicly saying the kiss on the lips at the 2023 World Cup awards ceremony in Australia had been consensual. We'll bring you more on that story as the trial develops. And Sir Alex Ferguson led the tributes to Denis Law as the football community paid their final respects to the King in Manchester, saying he was one of the greatest players at United. Ferguson, the former Manchester United manager, was in attendance alongside several other United greats today. Members of the public also paid their respects, and Old Trafford projected a tribute to the late footballer. Law remains the only Scottish player to have ever won the Ballon d'Or, and no man has scored more goals for the national team. He died at the age of 84 last month. And those are the latest GB News headlines. For now, more news from me in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2421 and €1.2007 euros. The price of gold is £2,335.10 per ounce. And the FTSE 100 is at 8,777 points.
Crash Law 24 sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing, but where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These are most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning. It could take a little while to clear. A cloudier story further east, and there could be some rain around as well. Similar for much of Northern Ireland and down across the eastern side of England, pretty cloudy, some drizzly outbreaks of rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet pushing its way through, but a brighter start perhaps for some parts of Wales and maybe southwest England, but here again we could have some fog or freezing fog patches to watch out for. As we go through the day tomorrow, most places staying grey and cloudy, still a few outbreaks of light rain towards the east, only one or two making their way further west. Western parts again, the best chance of seeing some brightness, perhaps a little bit more of that than today. Temperatures may be up a degree or so, but still feeling pretty chilly. Unsurprising, it is February and there's so much cloud around. Sticking with the largely cloudy skies as we go through the evening and through much of the night, but perhaps some greater, clearer skies developing for a time and a bit of rain pushing into the far southwest as well. More cloud to come as we go through later on this week, though we could see a bit of rain pushing in from the southwest. Bye-bye.
The latest GB News travel.
Good afternoon, I'm Johnny Ratner. Long queues on Merseyside continue on the M6 southbound lanes closed on the entry slip at junction 23. The East Lancashire Road exit, that's where a lorry's broken down. No change in South Yorkshire in Sheffield city centre. The A61 has been closed along Sheffield Parkway since last night as this police investigation continues. All approaches to the Park Square roundabout are also shut, including Sheaf Street, Broad Street and part of Duke Street. And trams are severely disrupted through the area as well. In North London, the North Circular is down to a single lane westbound from the Cooksbury interchange at Chingford towards the A10 where a van's broken down. On the M27 in Hampshire, one lane's closed westbound from junction 7 to 5 towards Southampton where a car's broken down. And on the trains, Northern can't run from Burnley Manchester Road to Hebden Bridge after a train broke down. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website gbnews.com.
Welcome back. I'm Miriam Cates. You're watching GB News. And a shock new poll has Reform UK surging to its highest figure so far. The party has topped the latest YouGov poll with 26% of the vote, pushing the Labour Party down into second place and moving 5 points clear of the Conservatives. Well, let's get the thoughts now of Reform UK's chairman in Sutton Coldfield, Mark Hoth. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. This is good news for Reform. The party seems to be going from strength to strength. Of course, all the talk in the Conservative Party is, will there be a deal? But I imagine you're not thinking about that right now.
No, I'm not thinking about it at all. Hi, Miriam, by the way. I'm not thinking about it at all. You know, we've got very little in common with the Conservatives when you think about things, really. You know, they want net zero. They, you know, obviously high taxation, unlimited immigration. So we've got very little in common with them. So all these calls about, you know, we're going to merge or have a a deal with the Conservatives. I just can't see that happening, and we don't really need it the way things are going at the moment.
I suppose what some people would say, though, is that let's say we do approach the next election and Reform is still ahead, potentially, but on maybe approaching 30 points. That still might not be enough to oust a Labour government if the Conservatives won 2025. Labour could come through the middle.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly true looking at the polls as they stand at the moment. But I think what we need to think about is, you know, in July, we got 14%. So now we're up and further, well, nearly 10%, nearly 10% in the polls. Our membership's gone from 50,000 to 200,000 in that time as well. So we've got the momentum, whereas all the, you know, the metrics for the Conservative Party is very much going backwards. Their membership's down, their polling's down. And so that's just in the space of just over 7 months of the Labour government. And I can't see the way the Labour government are going that they'd even maintain a poll of 25%. The way things are going. So more and more Labour supporters are coming to us, more and more Conservatives are coming to us, and that bodes well for us. So I don't see any reason why in the long term that we can't seriously think about forming a majority on our own.
Now, in the 2024 election, obviously Nigel Farage had just returned to lead the party. You did very well. As you said, you've increased your vote share since then. But of course, you will now come under increasing scrutiny. And one of the criticisms of the 2024 manifesto was that there were tens of billions of pounds of uncosted spending and tax cuts. Is Reform now drawing up more costed plans of how you're going to improve the economy?
Well, yeah, I think the criticism largely came from our supporters back in July. As far as we're concerned, much of it was very well costed. But, you know, what we will do is we will go away and obviously come up with some more policies as we move forward, which will be well costed. You know, I mentioned net zero to start off with. Just getting rid of that will save billions, you know, up to £100 billion in money just by scrapping net zero. That's just a start point. When we look at what we'd look to do around, you know, largely copying what's happening in the States, where we look into, you know, really where waste is in government, which is what they're doing there. And there is, as Rupert Lowe often says, there's an extraordinary amount of waste in government, both national government and local government, which we would look to reduce quite significantly. You know, we said £5 in every £100 can be reduced. That saves more billions of pounds of money, which would then give us the facility to cut taxes, which is what we stand for, cutting taxes, which again is another difference from the Conservatives, because the tax burden at the end of the last Parliament was the highest since the Second World War.
Of course, a lot of people would say that the reason for that is an ageing population. We've seen extraordinary increases in life expectancy. After the Second World War, life expectancy was 65. It's now 81. We've had a collapse in birth rates. Isn't the increase in taxation and spending just a function of the fact that we now only have 3 workers to every pensioner, something that's never been the case before in our history?
No, that's certainly an issue. However, you know, as I said, the amount of waste that goes on, both in local and national government, is extraordinary. The amount of waste we've seen already in the last 7 months of the Labour government has been extraordinary. You know, starting with the net zero, £22 billion on carbon capture, which doesn't work. Moving on forward to giving billions and millions of pounds away abroad while cutting winter fuel allowance for our pensioners. Also, at the same time, cut inheritance tax being levied on farmers while giving £500 million away to foreign farmers.
Mark, I've now got, just sorry to interrupt you, but I've now got Chris Hope with me here in the studio, our political editor. He's got a couple of questions for you, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Mark. Great to see you on GBNews. Thank you for coming on. A simple question for Reform UK. Have you got enough people to form a government? You need about 120 ministers. We know who 5 of them might be. You've got 5 MPs and that's it. How on earth can you convince voters that you've got enough experience in depth to, frankly, run a country?
Well, I think what you'd find with our candidates that are put forward, a high majority of them are actually experienced business people. Now, when we look at the cabinet that's currently sitting at the moment, not one of them has held a position in business. You mentioned the 5 MPs that we've currently got, obviously all experienced in business. And there are obviously a high number of our candidates that would stand are experienced in business, i.e. delivering things, lowering costs, etc., etc. I mean, I can speak for myself. I've got a business. I know exactly, you know, I've worked 25 years in one of the country's largest banks. That's all about, you know, delivering, but also delivering on a budget. Whereas we see it, as I say, at the moment, the current government hasn't got a single person in it that's ever delivered anything in business or, for that matter, much else.
Indeed. What's your aim in terms of the polling? You know, where would you like to see that your top rating be? Do you think you can reach 30% beyond that?
I think we can reach beyond that. As I said earlier on, Miriam, you know, we've seen an extraordinary rise from 14% to where we sit now in a very short space of time. Unfortunately, there's a long time to go until the next election, you know, so unfortunately for the UK, that is. But, you know, if we carry on with the momentum as it is, we can get above 30, mid-30s, and our chairman's been very, very clear. Zia Youssef is very, very clear. We are aiming to get enough votes and enough seats to form an overall majority at the next election. And that was always our plan, right from the start. Always our plan, because we knew Labour would be a disaster. They're proving to be that, and that's exactly what we would expect to happen as we move forward.
Mark Hoth, thank you so much for joining us. Mark Hoth from Reform there. Chris, you can't fault their ambition. No. I mean, I think your point is a good one about forming a government. It's all very well being high up in the polls, but let's say Reform did get enough seats to form an overall majority or in some sort of coalition. You then have all these MPs who've never set foot in Parliament, who don't understand parliamentary procedure, which does take years and years to learn, suddenly expected to be in government. It's a tall order.
That's quite. And the vetting, and who are they? And the vetting is a big issue for the party in the past. That's the most important thing that Farage does. It really hurts him when he has these candidates fall apart under scrutiny. He's doing all he can to vet them. He thinks the vetting wasn't good enough in July last year. They got 5 MPs. They haven't even got a lot of short money, the money that opposition parties get to generate policy ideas to run the country. He hasn't even got that. I think he's the 8th biggest grouping in Parliament, Reform UK. I mean, ahead of them are there's other groups. You know, it's quite extraordinary how small they are, and yet they purport to be the party to form the next government to run this country. It will be a complete, well, not revolution, that's different, but something like a seismic moment if Nigel Farage can walk through Downing Street as the leader. There, you're seeing them there. I think that is the extent of the MPs who are Reform UK MPs. And even then, I mean, James McMurdoch, he's got a bit of experience in business, not as much as that chairman of Sutton Coldfield was saying. I think Rupert Lowe is most experienced. I'm not sure what Janssen has run. He's been, of course, a councillor and an MP before. But really, where is the experience of those 5 men, and they're all men, of course, who can actually run the country? And who is your Work and Pensions Secretary? Who is your Culture Secretary amongst those 5 individuals? A lot of questions to be asked, increasingly made, I think, about this party.
That's right, and it does highlight this very strange disparity that we get under first past the post, because they are only 5 MPs, but they did receive more votes than the Liberal Democrat, who I think have over 70 MPs, so that they seem small, and yet their outside support shown in the polling puts them as the biggest party in the UK.
That's right. I think there's a number, like 32% in the polls when the system flips and you get a lot more MPs for only a few more percent in votes. That's why we saw Labour do so well last summer in that July the 4th election. It's a moment when the system flips in your favour. Right now, they're getting maybe 120 MPs, but there'll be a moment where they could be in landslide territory if they keep going up in the polls.
Indeed. Well, Chris Hope, thank you very much for that, and I'm sure we'll be bringing lots more polling news over the next few weeks. But moving on, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean All Clear Skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Plenty of cloud elsewhere across Europe, could also turn showery at times. These showers turning increasingly thundery as we head into Thursday for some. Largely dry across Madeira and Tenerife, though it could be breezy at times across the Canary Islands. But as we move our way further east, much more cloud, also some showers at times. These could start to turn thundery across parts of Croatia, Albania and also parts of Greece as we head into Thursday. So those showers continuing for some, drier elsewhere with the best of the temperatures across Tenerife.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Emily Carver. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, joining us in the studio now is Chia Eaglin and Erin Cobb from Clark's Farm Greyhound Rescue, who have brought along two very special guests. This is Duchess.
So Duchess
and
is the one I'm stroking. This is Duchess, isn't it? Our lady joining us this morning, and then over there is Vieira.
Vieira's a chap, isn't he? And Duchess is a lady. So,
talk to us about their history. Now, they used to be racing dogs, didn't they? But now they're looking for a home.
Yeah, so both of these dogs were racing greyhounds. They have retired recently. So now we are getting them ready and prepared to go into a forever home, essentially.
So anyone watching, make sure you get on the Clark's Farm website later on today, because these guys are up for adoption. And I mean,
and they are very cute.
How gorgeous.
Look how well behaved they are as well. They were a little bit excited when they came in because it's their first time on TV and they wanted to make a good impression.
They did.
Now
she's done. Now they're both looking, aren't they? They know what's up on
yawning already.
Now, talk to us about greyhounds as a breed. If anyone was going to adopt a greyhound, what would they expect?
I'd say the first thing is couch potatoes. They are the most lazy dog ever.
Really? You wouldn't expect that because of the background?
Everyone has this massive misconception that they need loads of exercise, loads of walks, but they are actually, quite happy with 2 20-minute walks a day. They are so laid back.
Yeah.
Easy.
As long as they're able to have their moments of madness, zoomies, they do get the sillies, of course. But once they've had that, they are so happy to just chill out on the sofa with you. Usually,
they've all got different personalities, and it's just great to see. Even though some of them,
Duchess just perched on the back of your head.
Duchess is going to fall asleep. You're on TV, Duchess.
She's watching.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your-say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Tom Harwood. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. It's 12 minutes to 6. I'm Miriam Cates and you're watching GB News. Now, a story from Australia where a transgender woman, Roxanne Tickle, has won a discrimination case against a woman-only social media app after Roxanne Tickle was denied access on the basis of being male. Now, I'm delighted that in the studio we have the founder of the app called Giggle for Girls, Sal Grover, who is appealing this decision, and also Sal's lawyer, Catherine Dees. I know you have been travelling and jet-lagged, but thank you so much for joining us in the studio. Sal, bring us up to date. How did this case come about?
Oh, my gosh. OK, so in 2022, I received an Australian Human Rights Commission complaint citing gender identity discrimination. And to settle it, basically, I would have to let this man on the app, let all men who claim to be women on the app, go to sex and gender education, which could only be one thing, pay him $20,000 and moderate all the content on the app so that no man who claims to be a woman was offended. And I was like, well, I'm not doing any of that.
And this is an app specifically for women?
It was just an app for women. And I mean, I don't even remember removing him because men would get on and we would remove them. Like, this was not an event. And so I was just like, absolutely no way am I going to agree to any of this. I was also, at the time, I was 15 weeks pregnant when I got the complaint. And so as we were going through the process, by the time it was like time for me to make a decision whether I would settle or not, I mean, I'd had scans. I'd found out I was having a girl. I was like, sex is assigned at birth. Like, I know, this is just nonsense. My lived experience is proving what you guys are saying is nonsense. So I said no, and it escalated to federal court. And it's been a long process, obviously. And last year we got the decision where the judge decided that sex is changeable. Men can be women. Gender identity is more important than sex in law. And yeah, I mean, it was as crazy as you can imagine.
And extraordinarily, you were shown an image in court that made you laugh. What happened next?
So basically, during cross-examination, I was asked to sort of turn to the court book to have a look at an image that was a meme someone else had created of Roxanne Tickle, and it was the aim of it was to be a funny meme, and it was sort of saying that he just didn't like the smell of sweaty balls. It was sort of like paraphrasing him off an interview he had done on SBS in Australia. And it was just, the situation was so insane. I mean, federal court being asked to look at a meme that says sweaty balls. And I laughed at it. I laughed at it because it was just, this is so surreal. Yeah. And because of that, the damages that Tickle was awarded $10,000 because I laughed.
Astonishing, hurt feelings. Now, Catherine, you're representing your solicitor in this case, and what seems extraordinary to me is that the judge has decided, based on law, that sex is changeable and can't be fixed or can't be decided. What implications does this have, not only in Australia but also around the world?
Well, this is setting a precedent in the war between gender identity and sex-based rights. And here in Australia, the judge decided that gender identity takes primacy. He also redefined sex to say that it is changeable, it is not binary, and it is not necessarily rooted in biology. It can also be how you are perceived by others and how you socially present yourself. So obviously that has grave implications for women. But further to that, the way that it was decided was the judge relied on decisions within tribunals at the United Nations. So these are faceless, unaccountable bureaucrats who've made decisions about sort of discrete, very specific circumstances and then applied it to our domestic law. So we're seeing the United Nations able to intrude upon national sovereignty for our ability, like overriding domestic law. So for any other common law countries that are faced with this question and that are signed up as member nation states to bodies like the United Nations, I mean, we're seeing this intrusion into national sovereignty. So this has very grave implications for other common law countries.
Now, Sal, it would have been easy for you to, especially being pregnant, to just say, I can't be bothered to fight this case, but you've been extraordinarily brave. And, you know, there are comic aspects of this case. It's called Giggle versus Tickle. But it's not comic for you, is it? What have been the consequences? And also you, Catherine, what have been the consequences personally, very, very quickly?
Well, I mean, you say sort of it would have been easy. No, it wouldn't. I am actually a woman. I have a daughter. Kath has 3 daughters. It wouldn't be easy to sit back and just accept that, like, we had been erased in law. It's easier to actually fight because you go, oh, we can actually win this in the end. So I don't regret it for a second, but I am very much looking forward to when it's over.
We're going to have to leave it there because I do have to read a writer reply. And on this news that Sal is appealing the judgment, Roxanne Tickle said that it was disappointing and he was being dragged back to court because of a small group of people who want to make life difficult. Well, thank you so much for watching me today. We've got Martin back tomorrow, but up next we've got Jubes & Co, the fiercest debate show in town. And after this, it will be time for the weather.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon. Here's your latest Met Office weather update for GB News on this rather grey day. More cloudy, cold weather to come as we go through the rest of this week. We do currently still have high pressure to the northeast of us, and it's this that's led to that easterly flow. So we're dragging in our air from the east, and that's why we have so much cloud. And also the greatest chance of some further rain, perhaps even a bit of sleet and hail snow, will be across eastern areas. Further west, there has been a bit of sunshine today, not much, and with that then there will also be some clear breaks overnight, but again, not a lot of these. Most places staying grey, staying cloudy, and there could still be some damp weather around too. Because of the cloud though, temperatures not dropping a huge amount, most places staying a few degrees above freezing, but where we get the clear skies overnight, we could see a touch of frost, perhaps even some patches of fog or freezing fog. These are most likely across western, northwestern parts of Scotland first thing tomorrow morning and could take a little while to clear. A cloudier